Chapter 544. It had been snowing and raining in Xia City for nearly a week now. The ground and all sorts of buildings seemed to be permeated by the moisture. Many people complained that their entire bodies were rusty after a night's sleep. Their joints creaked and groaned. It was useless even if they turned the heating system to the max. There were even people petitioning on the government's website. They hoped that Xia City would use interference methods to disperse the rain and clouds so that the citizens could enjoy the warmth of the winter sun for a few days. On the Observing Faces show, the beautiful host used the tone of a script to chat with Phantom I Che-e. They talked about the weather and made it one of the topics of their conversation. Don't blame her for being a vase. Lord Ghost, I loved this. The eyes of this old and unruly extraordinary were always so lively. They wandered back and forth on the beautiful host's body. Oh my God. Miss Sean must be working hard to make this show in this damned weather. The beautiful host subconsciously drew her legs together. Her face revealed the professional smile that she was most adept at. It's all right. The sea is calm and tranquil. But it really feels different when I get ashore. Actually, this was a blatant lie. Ever since the luxurious cruise ship rented by the show arrived at the outer seas of Xia City, the beautiful host had been on the ship the entire time. She hadn't left even half a step. The other person who did this was Ghost I Che-e by her side. It was these two who spoke frankly and with assurance about the freezing rain in Xia City. The beautiful host began to enter the main topic. I've heard quite a few people say that the freezing rain in Xia City may be the result of some interference. After all, in an environment of -20 degrees, it is very difficult for a heavy snow to suddenly turn into continuous rain. What do you think about this? What opinion can I have? Currently, the Xia City branch has issued a denial order according to the emergency regulations. Ouyang and the martial monarch have endorsed this order. As a member of the society, I don't have permission. I don't have interview rights like you media, so I can only obediently stay in the outer seas. The rain in the outer seas has stopped for the past 2 days. The pitiful adaptability of the beautiful host was completely inadequate to deal with Ghost Eye's teasing. She was a bit stupefied for a moment. Fortunately, Ghost Eye beamed as he picked up the flexible screen next to him. However, there are quite a few comments on this matter on the internet. I like this one more. Moisture seems to be diffusing between the heavens and the earth. But in fact, it has already deviated from the laws of nature. It seems illusory yet real, unable to circulate. The beautiful host hurriedly followed. You mean, this freezing rain is man-made? How could I say that? I just read one line and felt that its syntax was quite neat. After that, Ghost Eye teased the beautiful host while saying some vague words. The topic of conversation shifted from the freezing rain weather to the high number of deaths and injuries in Xia City. These were clearly sensitive topics, but he was able to use glib words to bypass the most important points. He never revealed his true position. To put it simply, I have a lot of money, and I will never do anything that offends people. No wonder he chose Dan E, a pretty face. If it were someone as eloquent as Li Baizhou, Ghost I might not have come. Octopus pointed at the program while choosing the medicine. But most of the time, he was more interested in the appearance and figure of the beautiful host. According to him, in this kind of program where the content depends entirely on the guests, a vase is really more suitable. It must be said that Octopus was a very talkative person, but he was especially talkative today. He was even a bit talkative. It was most likely because he had injected the medicine again, giving him quite a bit of pressure. Luo Nan leaned back on the recliner and continued to adjust his breathing. A rack was set up on one side of the recliner. A complete set of monitoring equipment was placed there, and the corresponding sensors were connected one after another. Octopus was probably afraid that Luo Nan would be bored, so he opened the video of last night's face reading program. But Luo Nan didn't respond. Most of it was due to his lack of energy. It was 10 in the morning, and the school classes had yet to end. But medicine waits for no man. It was hard for Luo Nan to persevere. He needed to replenish his medicine immediately. For this reason, Octopus escorted the relevant equipment and medicine from the east of the city to the west of the city. The reward was 0.5 honor points, which was 500,000 according to the market price. It was not an exaggeration to call this service a robbery. However, the one who set the price was the finance committee. If there were any doubts, they could appeal to Her Majesty Empress Wu. Besides, compared to the price of a set of deep blue walker equipment, this amount of money was nothing. Though Octopus was watching the program, most of his energy was placed on the monitoring data. He concocted the medicine while shaking his head. Don't blame me for being long-winded. This sort of continuous stimulation may not be fatal with your cultivation, but no one can tell the repercussions. Especially since you're on the mental side. Your brain is very precious. Since you're already here, what's the point of saying all this nonsense? Cat Eyes lay on the sofa, watching the program. The dancer's figure was actually a cut above that of the vase host. Unfortunately, Octopus didn't have the guts to watch. Cat Eyes' cultivation and temper had both risen recently, and she was moody. He was afraid of losing face by provoking her. Luckily, Cat Eyes was in a good mood right now. Hey, I'm passing by. Don't miss it. Roche Yoga First Stage, Jungle Shooting Bird Stance. It's very precious first-hand information. How about you give it to me? The price is negotiable. As Cat Eyes spoke, she minded her own business and switched the content of the projection in front of her. The display showed Luo Nan standing on one foot, twisting his neck and breaking his arms in a strange pose. The drizzling rain had drenched his hair, and even beads of ice had formed on it. It was both funny and embarrassing. This was the result of Cat Eyes' personal photography this morning. Back then, Luo Nan had taken a break from his busy schedule. After he arrived at school, he went to the northern shore jungle. He followed Gym Master Xiu's principle of combining the inside and the outside. He posed in nature in an attempt to probe the mysteries behind his grandfather and father's comical poses. Shuelei wasn't on guard against Cat Eyes, and he leaked the relevant words. Then, it spread throughout his circle of friends. Octopus was still picking and choosing. You've already posted these in the group. Is there anything more explosive? Cat Eyes gave him a sidelong glance. How about you drug him and let him run around naked outside for a bit? We'll record it when we get back. We'll split the profits 50-50. The two of them glanced at Luo Nan as they spoke. However, they didn't even roll their eyes at him, let alone get an echo. Right now, Luo Nan's hand was gently twirling a soft syringe. His eyes were fixed on the syringe. It was as if he wanted to unearth a forbidden secret technique to kill all the rebels within and outside of Xia City. He also seemed to be dispirited and helpless. His mind was faintly discernible, and his soul was wandering beyond the heavens. The two glanced at each other. At the same time, in a private chat channel on the Psychic Wave Network, information was displayed and refreshed layer by layer. See? I told you it was necessary. Is there a need to throw his life away? How could it be that serious? After all, we're doing this for his own good. Do you think we should make a move? I'm just a small fry. Yesterday I was a firefighter. Today I'm a bodyguard. Tomorrow I might even have to warm the bed. What qualifications do I have to speak? What's wrong with your mind? Speaking of which, do you really think you can make him sleep with you warming the bed? If you can do it, then don't look for me. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and get the person in charge. Sometimes this boss is simple and foolish, but sometimes he's as shrewd as a monkey. If you hesitate for too long and he sees through your flaws, then you're done for. Two simple words responded to Cat Eyes' long-winded speech. Inject. On the plane of reality, Cat Eyes gave Octopus a look. Her meaning was, oh, the vice president in charge has spoken. Octopus shrugged. He didn't hesitate any longer. He injected the prepared drug into Luo Nan. In the end, Luo Nan wasn't an omniscient god. He was completely unaware of the undercurrents operating on the Psychic Wave Network. His mind hadn't been idle since 100 hours ago, especially from yesterday afternoon until now. The trend of his activity was probably mysterious posture. Virtual exoskeleton assembly interface. Mysterious posture. Virtual exoskeleton assembly interface. This cycle went on without end. Occasionally, he would insert some adjustments to the situation in Sia City and the altar's framework. His mind was a bit restless and anxious due to the suppression effect of his cerebral cortex for the past 2 hours. He waited for the ice-cold drug to be injected into his blood vessels and take effect. Finally, he could relax his mind a bit. Some thoughts and emotions were like floating clouds that lingered in his mind. Luo Nan finally discovered that he was filled with envy and jealousy towards the archetype format and its accompanying deep blue walkers. He wasn't jealous of the combat strength of the deep blue walkers. He was jealous of the weapon platform behind it. It was a research system composed of the world's top scientific research power, the most top-notch talents, and the most extravagant resources. It was precisely because of this system that the archetype format was able to continuously develop, improve, and apply. How fortunate! And right now, the analysis process of the external neuron was presenting him with another system. Even though only a small part of the iceberg had been exposed, Luo Nan was able to get a glimpse of its grand, precise, and complete overall scale from the appallingly detailed assembly interface and the thousands upon thousands of various blueprints. Most importantly, it was impossible for it to correspond to the archetype format. It was certainly the genuine formatting theory. At least this was the case from what Luo Nan could see. Inconceivable. Luo Nan's mind hadn't stopped for even a moment since last night. Excitement, stimulation, and bewilderment formed a never-ending whirlpool of thoughts. How did this system come to be? Where did it come from? Was it the results of his grandfather's research back in the day? Or was there a deeper source? That fellow. His father. The reason why he sent the external neuron back was because it hid such an enormous secret? How did he discover it? How did he use it back in the day? Could the natural mode of words be overcome? Or was there a way around it? Could he obtain answers from the analysis and assembly process when faced with all sorts of puzzlement? Luo Nan didn't know, but he had already done it. Right now, he was twirling the soft needle tube. He was considering the problem of the muscle structure within the exoskeleton system. Chapter 545. After an entire night of research and combining with the mainstream structure of today's exoskeleton weapon platform, Luo Nan divided the virtual brain exoskeleton, which was still in the blueprint stage, into 7 modules. They were power, inner armor, outer armor, close combat, long range, support, and mounting. Below each module were several hundred to over 1,000 assembled spare parts. Every spare part had a detailed blueprint and a large amount of text explanation. Perhaps it even included the requirements for crafting. Luo Nan was unable to understand the most valuable part of the content due to the existence of the natural chasm of words. But through intuition, he could more or less experience the size and shape of the parts and understand the difference in size. And the vast majority of these parts could be found in Sia City and the surrounding areas covered by the Soul Cloak. Luo Nan spent most of last night searching for the corresponding material. He felt like he was playing a game of chain link. Every time he succeeded, a sense of accomplishment would spontaneously arise. There was no doubt that this gave him the greatest encouragement. It was as if this virtual brain exoskeleton could be completely assembled in the next second and he could wear it on his body. Even though it was illusory, there was always hope. But this excitement suddenly crashed into the muscle structure, which was the inner armor module, and it suddenly shattered into pieces. The inner armor module of the virtual brain exoskeleton was more like a close-fitting protective suit from Luo Nan's perspective. It felt like a layer of artificial muscles when worn on the body. It could expand and contract according to a certain range, hence the name. The main structure of this protective suit was not made of metal. Instead, it was woven from some macromolecular material and filled with some kind of liquid. The reason why he was able to recognize it was because of the existence of molecular formula-like symbols within the large section of text that he could not understand. The symbols directly displayed the short-range and long-range structural fragments of the macromolecular material. But there was still the problem of the natural chasm of words. Even if there was a molecular formula and a structural diagram, the manufacturing process was far beyond the heavens. It was hard to grasp. Unless there really was an almighty being that could directly control microscopic particles and forcefully produce it according to the structural diagram. But that was all. What truly troubled Luo Nan was that he could not find the real counterpart of this protective suit. At the very least, it did not exist within the area covered by the soul cloak. This was quite troublesome. With Luo Nan's shallow knowledge, he was unable to calculate the effect of the exoskeleton's lack of inner armor on the overall performance of the exoskeleton. Mulling over it right now was nothing more than adding to his worries. His rationality required him to suppress such thoughts. He had also tried using the coordination art to reduce the priority in this aspect. However, under the dual stimulation of drugs and emotions, the highly excited cerebral cortex was simply too hard to control. A lot of plausible molecular formulas and hieroglyphs that he did not quite understand shuttled back and forth in his brain. His mental power, which was already insufficient in the first place, occupied a considerable amount of space. I still need to hurry up and get to the practical level, Luo Nan muttered to himself. He completely ignored the existence of octopus and cat eyes nearby. The two who were ignored also quickly refreshed their messages in the dedicated channel. Is it okay to talk to yourself like this? He should be fine. Should. There are indeed some hallucinogens in it. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult to hide it from him. The dosage was also discussed by a bunch of people in the group. It's quite accurate. Is he trying to avoid responsibility? In any case, I don't see the slightest inclination to sleep. He'll definitely be able to sense it. Do you believe that he'll pull the plug immediately and take all of us at the same time? Are you afraid of the dripping sword HMG? The two entered into crosstalk mode. They actually hoped that the mastermind of this matter, the vice president, would hurry up and take responsibility. The problem was that there was no reply after the vice president issued the command. While they were looking at each other in dismay, Gauda pulled a suitcase that was half the height of a person and walked out of the elevator. Luo Nan's gaze immediately moved away from the soft syringe and cast over there. Mr. Luo, an urgent message from the military. Luo Nan took a deep breath and sat up straight. A deep blue walker? Yes, an engineering prototype. Sister Yuan's efficiency is truly super high. Luo Nan praised in anger. Looking at her appearance, if it weren't for the syringe and sensor inserted into his body, he would have already gotten up to open the suitcase and research it. To the side, cat eyes stared at Octopus. Octopus glanced at cat eyes. Their thoughts were all subtle, and this was directly reflected in the dedicated channel. Vice President this isn't right, right? You're efficient at getting favorable impressions. We'll do things that offend people. It's not too good to bring it over right now. Isn't this giving him a heart shot? Yuan finally spoke to explain. The finance committee and the military's efficiency has exceeded expectations. Can you control the scene a bit? No matter what sort of undercurrents were surging in private, the metal suitcase containing the deep blue walker had already arrived before Luo Nan. Luo Nan didn't even need to open it. He could see the special white light within through his mental senses. Luo Nan extended his hand and attempted to open the suitcase. To the side, Octopus gave a warning. Needles. Be careful of needles. Can't you research it after the infusion? You're using your brain too much right now. Do you want to become mentally ill? I'm just looking. Brother Gao, can you open it a bit? Luo Nan wasn't a stubborn person, but under the influence of the suitcase full of white light, his current self-control was close to zero. Gauda hesitated for a moment, but he still walked forward under the sharp gazes of Octopus and cat eyes. He placed the metal suitcase flat according to the operation requirements. Then he opened the corresponding mechanism according to the unlock code sent by the military. The metal suitcase slowly opened amidst the clear and circular electromagnetic sound. At the same time, the suitcase separated. It was like an open folding chair under the support of a special metal frame. All sorts of accessory modules were embedded in the surrounding. Under the illumination of the lighting, a smooth and clean blue and white color like porcelain appeared. According to the operating procedures, the user just needed to sit on the chair and this exoskeleton armor would automatically assemble and assemble. The core installation would be worn for 15 seconds, and the entire process would take approximately 45 seconds. Gouda explained a step further. There's still room for adjustment when the armor is worn. However, this is an engineering prototype. It hasn't been activated yet. Luo Nan stared at the metal folding chair in front of him. He asked with interest, I heard that the activation condition is the format of fire. Is this true? According to the information, the activated deep blue walker would undergo continuous fine adjustments according to the user's specific circumstances. For example, the overly dazzling outer coating would become much more restrained under the burning of the format of fire. Its built-in artificial intelligence chip could support deep neural network learning to coordinate with synchronization, guidance, and other functions. When necessary, such as when the user was seriously injured or unconscious, it could also perform some emergency operations, such as evacuation, concealment, and so on. Gouda responded, to be precise, starting from the third generation, all deep blue walkers must undergo 2 confirmations before they can be activated. That is, DNA and the format of fire. This covers 3 types of authority, identity, qualifications, and control characteristics. However, it is said that the latest generation of research and development is to integrate all authority into the Dynamo core, including artificial intelligence. The equipment can only be used for auxiliary calculations. The Dynamo core, huh? Luo Nan looked pensive. As the cooperation between the military and the society grew closer day by day, a considerable amount of information was made available to the society. The Dynamo core was no longer a secret. According to the military's information, the Dynamo core was the center of energy control and conversion. It could effectively increase the might of the format of fire and strengthen the control power of the deep blue walkers. The vast majority of burners had received the relevant implantation. The problem was that the implanted dynamo core of a burner couldn't be like the external neuron. It could freely change and flow between the virtual and the real. Furthermore, it had a precise and complete system like the virtual brain app. There was a clear generation difference between the two. Then, this generation difference corresponded to concrete equipment. What kind of scene would it be? Luo Nan subconsciously ground his teeth to eliminate the numb feeling in his mouth. It was as if electricity had passed through him. Under the stimulation of drugs, the neurons in various places would be activated to show the ups and downs of his mood. It wasn't just his mood. Luo Nan's train of thought was a bit erratic. It was a bit hard to grasp. Now, he had a special feeling about the ghastly white light in filter vision. This light, which only he could see, radiated from the exoskeleton armor in front of him. It seemed to have a penetrating sense of fragility. It made him suddenly have a strange thought. The first equipment interface that the virtual brain app presented was of a relatively high standard. A pop-up window appeared and switched to the current interface with a warning. Perhaps the material was a grade lower, causing some sort of weakening. The deep blue walkers were already the world's most cutting-edge individual weapon system. And it was of a low grade. Wouldn't it be easier to understand if an advanced civilization had descended on Earth? Luo Nan unconsciously grinned and laughed. He was inexplicably happy. All right, I'll put aside the completely clueless advanced civilization protective suit for now. Let's look at something a bit more practical. With God's help, he removed the exoskeleton right arm module from the metal box. He held it in his hand and pondered it carefully. According to the blueprints on the assembly interface, the modification process here seemed to be the simplest of all. The original arm module had 3 functions: palm, wrist, and forearm. But he only needed one function. I don't need this and that. How do I pull it off? Luo Nan wasn't just talking. He was about to make his move. It didn't feel bad to the touch. God subconsciously glanced at the two beside him. The higher-ups of the security team knew about Luo Nan's drug injection plan. They had made the corresponding arrangements. But no one had told him that Luo Nan would be like this after the injection. Was he drunk? Cat Eyes wouldn't take the blame. She stared at Octopus. Octopus had an innocent expression. Luckily, God could answer this question. It was a prototype that hadn't been debugged. All sorts of functions needed to be adjusted. It was just right for DIY. Dismantling, and dismantling was very normal. But dismantling wasn't the end of it. Structural adjustments needed to be made, and the wiring design needed to be changed as well. Luo Nan watched as God's emotions floated, but his mouth was still able to speak clearly and logically. God, a non-professional, was a bit stupefied when he listed 2 or 3 requests. He subconsciously asked, "Should we transfer an engineer over?" The group of people looked at each other in dismay when a call was made to the Hexier. Luo Nan saw it and clapped his hands in laughter. Chapter 546. 10 minutes later, worker Zhai arrived at Gear. Originally, he and Luo Nan had discussed it over. Luo Nan would bring the materials for the exchange at night for Luo Nan's reference. He would accompany Luo Nan to stay up late and work overtime to rush out the lesson plans for the lecture the day after tomorrow. However, Luo Nan skipped class in the morning. The two contacted each other once during this time, and they decided to move the time forward. The sooner they finished, the sooner their hearts would calm down. Exchanging materials was not a problem for worker Zhai. As an engineer, recording experiments was second nature to him. He definitely had enough data and materials. Plus, communication materials focused on real experience and feelings, so there was no need for too much embellishment. After yesterday's dinner, with the help of the alcohol, he finished it in a few hours. However, when worker Zhai entered, he saw another fellow who was inexplicably excited. "The professionals are here." Luo Nan swayed as he stood up from the recliner. He didn't wait for worker Zhai to come close before he shouted, "Worker Zhai, there's something I want to consult you about." Worker Zhai faintly felt that Luo Nan was a bit odd. He just responded subconsciously when he was pulled over. Worker Zhai listened to Luo Nan mumble about the requirements for modifying the ARM module. Fortunately, worker Zhai lived up to his reputation as a professional. He normally had a certain amount of research on exoskeleton technology. He listened to Luo Nan's request and inspected the actual object a few times. Then he said, "This is the structure of a pulse weapon. All you need to consider is the path of pulse wave deformation. There's also the field emission structure. Don't we have another one? How to guarantee the power output? What about the isolation barrier?" Worker Zhai's doubts were professional. Be it the former military officer or the 2 members of society, none of them knew how to respond. But Luo Nan knew that he had found the right person. He said in delight, "You don't need to worry about that. I want this style. Will it be troublesome to modify it? How long will it take?" Although worker Zhai had a good temper, he was a very strict person. He frowned slightly when he heard what was said and was about to ask again when he saw Cat Eyes and Octopus giving him meaningful looks. God's expression was also very strange. At this time, worker Zhai finally confirmed that Luo Nan's state was a bit abnormal. At the very least, it was far too unrestrained. In the end, he was a mature person. He resisted the urge to ask too many questions. He just smiled at Luo Nan. "If you have some handy tools on hand, it'll probably take half an hour." Luo Nan didn't speak. He just stared straight at God. The latter was slightly stifled, but he came to a realization in time. The deep blue walkers come with their own basic maintenance modules. The engineering machine is also equipped with a simple maintenance platform. Excellent. There are many things to do. Let's hurry up. A lot? Worker Zhai stared blankly once more. His gaze turned towards the folding chair in front of him. To an engineer like him, being able to directly use the deep blue walker was indeed a rare opportunity. But there were more than a dozen complicated modules in it. He couldn't possibly have to change all of them, right? Just based on Luo Nan's empty words. Also, didn't he come here to ponder over teaching plans? A minute later, Worker Zhai finally learned the ins and outs of Luo Nan's current state from the special channel. He was convinced by this young man who could make sleeping pills have a stimulant effect. In the dedicated channel, another conspirator appeared. So, the situation is out of control now? It's alright. At least his concentration is starting to slacken. Although I'm excited, my train of thought is jumping too much, and it's not consistent. There are more and more blank scenes, and I can barely be considered to have entered the state. Must you use this method? I had no choice but to do so. The data collected over the past 2 days isn't very optimistic. Ever since the first injection, he has been in a highly excited state for 60 consecutive hours. Moreover, the overuse of his brain is prominent. The metabolic protein content in his brain is seriously over the limit. He's simply in a state where his blood vessels could burst at any moment. Worker Zhai thought of the situation he saw last night. He really does look very tired, but he seems to be forcing himself to be excited. So he needs sleep to adjust. It doesn't need to be too long. 1 or 2 cycles should be enough. Worker Zhai recalled the relevant common sense. So it's just 3 hours? It'd be better if he could have a complete sleep cycle. Hey, look. His brain waves have entered the 5 Hz range. He successfully entered the first stage of light sleep. Cat Eyes shot a glance and sent a middle finger in the channel. Do you sleep with your eyes open and your eyeballs rolling? Octopus was paying attention to the monitoring equipment. He turned his head in astonishment when he heard Luo Nan's voice. He just so happened to make eye contact with Luo Nan's shifting pupils. He subconsciously laughed awkwardly. Is it okay? A lot. It's very messy. Luo Nan really did hear Octopus's words. He responded. The first thing he said was his direct feelings. Then he said more genuine emotions. I'm getting closer and closer. The surrounding group of people looked at each other in dismay, but Luo Nan grinned once more. He was suddenly able to understand why discoveries like the virtual brain app and the mysterious posture came one after another. They brought him more and more troubles and challenges. It was because he had reached a certain standard. He was like a baby who had just opened his eyes and saw a world of mottled colors. It was because he was getting closer and closer to the domain his grandfather, his father, and his mother had touched upon. He discovered more footprints that had not been annihilated by time. And it was because his growth speed was getting faster and faster. It was like he was running at high speed through a primitive jungle that no one had ever cultivated. The branches struck his face every moment, leaving behind one mark after another. He needed all of these elements. But there was too much. Too much. When it was suddenly laid out, there were countless details, countless interpretations, and countless ambiguities. Just like the past 2 days. Luo Nan's mind was originally filled with Rui Wen's 2000th part. It was the laying of the altar's frame. But the virtual brain app popped up. His grandfather and father's photo popped up. And now he forcefully filled in the exoskeleton modification, and don't forget that there was an extraordinary in the cloud world. There was a giant crocodile-like Quantum Corporation hidden amidst the surging flood of capital. Different missions and projects. Synchronized time processes. These were simply the natural enemies of the human brain. One of the fundamental keys of the planning technique was to capture even more information in an instant's time sequence, to obtain even more precise meaning. But how could completely different domains, vast and boundless ranges and levels be merged into one? How could a meaningful result be obtained? This was Luo Nan's last clear thought. Next, he entered a wondrous state of emptiness. Everything was laid out before his eyes, but this thing called meaning seemed to be slowly fading away. He looked at the external neuron. It flickered in the nothingness. The wraith sign gradually grew clear. Every puppet, believer, and the entire sealed system appeared one after another. Of course, there was the external world. The soul cloak attacked endlessly. It had already covered the surrounding area of Xia City. It was in the sea, it was in the wilderness. It unexpectedly reached its limit. Then it suddenly flashed back. The entire earth contracted, condensing into Luo Nan at the very center. Then it continued, but it turned into a sky full of stars. It was the starry sky of the virtual brain. It was resplendent and chaotic. Hold on. What did he see just now? Countless bright spots. A mottled and multicolored scenery. There were familiar people and monsters. There was intense light that lingered without dissipating. But what was light? What was scenery? What was a person? What was a monster? What in the world were those? Those inexplicable things. Those things, Luo Nan was dazed. He was in chaos. He was lost. He didn't struggle. He didn't feel fear. His originally excited brain regions entered a state of inhibition one by one. The synaptic connections between his neurons temporarily shut down. His powerful instincts, located at the lowest level of life, radiated a single signal. Rest. Rest. Sleep. Sleep. Luo Nan nearly fell asleep. Perhaps he did fall asleep. But the intense signal that came from his instincts, after completing its task, crossed a bit of boundary with imprecision. Inhibition and stimulation switched in an instant. A spark of inspiration flashed through Luo Nan's mind amidst the emptiness and chaos. His brain only had a few computational resources, and he was faced with a problem. Sleep. What was sleep? Just as the meaning was about to become clear, a change occurred. A new element was unearthed. How could I sleep? He didn't know the exact meaning, but there was an intense resistance from his instincts. It was a remnant imprint of obsession before his consciousness fell into complete chaos. The remnant and the germination collided together, and another fuzzy concept burst forth. I can't sleep. I have to move. I have to move. The distinction between the two concepts was still unclear, but the functions of each brain region were already slowly recovering amidst the turbulence. They followed the pattern before he became unconscious, spontaneously gathering information from the surroundings. But the power wasn't sufficient, and the range was limited. They could only linger within a narrow area. The dense and dazzling specks of light, the darkness that made it impossible to distinguish the direction, made Luo Nan instinctively move away from the most eye-catching area. He went to search for an even simpler element. And at this time, an extremely simple structure appeared in the upper right corner of the interface. There were a limited number of specks of light, and the lines between the specks of light were extremely simple, yet inexplicably familiar. The corresponding concept was derived from this. Yes, it was a person. A small person that seemed to be dancing and swinging its arms and legs. It was simple yet full of movement. Move, move. Crash. Luo Nan suddenly stood up, shocking everyone in the room. The sky was gradually turning dark, and the lighting in the room was dim. Over 6 hours had already passed by. Speaking of which, the sleep plan had basically achieved success. Octopus began to scatter flowers in the group in celebration, while Cat Eyes mocked and ridiculed him from the side. Worker Zhai remained here all this time. After completing the modification of the ARM module, he discussed the various principles and details of the Deep Blue Walkers with God. Qinikuan strenuously stared at Rui Wen, who was in the corner. He didn't know what was going on today, but the little girl wasn't as quiet as she had been 2 days ago. She flickered in and out of existence, appearing and disappearing like a phantom. She would often disappear in the blink of an eye, then return in the blink of an eye. It made one's nerves weak. Under such circumstances, Luo Nan stood up straight without any warning. This awakening. Not good. Cat Eyes leaped over the sofa with a flip. She borrowed the obstructed line of sight to leap outside. God and Qinikuan turned their heads at the same time. Worker Zhai's hand trembled, and the front end of the heavy metal component touched the ground. There was also Roy Wen. She looked over with concentration. As for Octopus, he was right in front of the monitoring device. He was the closest, but he was shocked by Luo Nan. He was a step too slow. He saw that the two were within arm's reach, so he could only shout, "Listen to me explain." Huh? Luo Nan just walked right in front of Octopus's nose. He was completely indifferent to the people and the situation around him. He took 2 steps forward, and the sensors and whatnot were detached one after another. Octopus could only rejoice that the syringe had been pulled out earlier. In the next moment, his eyes went wide as he watched Luo Nan adopt the hilarious posture that Cat Eyes had shouted at him. Luo Nan raised his legs, bent his arms, and bent his waist. His head looked back, and there was the sound of breathing. Oh, he was muttering something. There were many syllables, but Octopus was unable to hear the concrete meaning because he was chanted and abbreviated. Instead, he felt the air buzz and vibrate, so much so that his lips and the skin of his face went a bit numb. Several seconds later, a new sound joined in. Walala. Walala. It was like the trembling of metal chains that encircled the surroundings. It was hard to tell where it ended. This bizarre scene caused Octopus to subconsciously try to move away from Luo Nan, but his body went inexplicably stiff. It was as if he was bound by an invisible force. His chest, abdomen, and limbs were constricted. Not to mention moving, even breathing began to feel difficult. Octopus was a bit flustered. Hey! What the hell is going on? In the blink of an eye, his shout was drowned out by the intense vibrating of the chains. Even he himself couldn't hear it. There was a moment when Octopus practically believed that this was the only sound left in the world. It was completely flooded by the invisible chains. They encircled and interweaved, gradually erasing all gaps. And Luo Nan's posture was changing before his eyes. He was spinning. His limbs followed the spinning momentum, rising and falling up and down, crisscrossing and falling. He was simply dancing gracefully and lightly. He was done for. Sleepwalking. Hysteria. The surrounding situation and emotions were meaningless to Luo Nan. In fact, everything he touched, everything he sensed, everything he did lacked a clear meaning. He wasn't sleeping. Why wasn't he sleeping? He moved. Why did he need to move? Those people, those scenes, those stimuli. They came one after another, lingering without dissipating. In the end, how should he evolve? In what direction should he go? The vibrating sounds of clattering interweaved and piled up layer by layer. They gradually transformed into a surging force that was ready to gush out. He wanted to justify himself. But he was separated by a piece of paper, a layer of fog. He was unable to discern clearly no matter how hard he tried. What should he do? What should he do? Luo Nan's will pervaded the world once more, stirring the curtain of Xia City's night. He searched for the answer that was already at the tip of his tongue, but it was hard to advance an inch further. The scene of Xia City and its surroundings unfolded and contracted over and over again. It went through a seemingly meaningless cycle. But every cycle caused his will to fall from a realm that people were unable to perceive. It was like dark clouds that pressed down on an entire city, giving birth to a hazy and restless power. This power was on the verge of surpassing the limits of the polar domain. It entered the abyss region and even the even shallower mental plane. More and more ability users discovered this trend. The electric waves and psychic waves that traveled inside and outside of Xia City became more complex and subtle. And at this very moment, in a certain sanatorium on the outskirts of the city, an old man suddenly sat up in fright. He gasped for breath, coughed, and muttered something intermittently. The warning lights flashed, and the special nurse rushed over. She wanted to inject the old man with a tranquilizer. This was a common practice. But who knew that the old man's thin and weak body, which had already been tortured to the limit by the hallucinations, would somehow burst forth with a powerful energy. He pushed aside the special nurse and faced the deep night and freezing rain outside the window. He spread his arms wide open and laughed loudly. All things are prepared for me. My heart is the universe. A hoarse voice tore out from his throat. It was like the rolling thunder of a rainy night. The tangible sound wave trapped the room, but the incorporeal vibration broke through all obstructions. It penetrated the boundary between the material and the mental. It resonated with the blood vessels dozens of kilometers away with a buzzing sound. The sound of thunder came stealthily, and lightning came startling. The flash of an instant penetrated through everything. It pierced through the piece of paper, dispersed the layer of fog, and revealed the answer that should have yet to come. Form, pronunciation, mood, charm. All sorts of elements converged into a concept, a meaning, yet it was also a concrete and minute word. Perhaps some details could be changed, but the core elements were firm and unchangeable. Chapter 547. Luo Nan's figure suddenly froze. He had returned to his normal standing posture. He just stared blankly ahead. It was as if there was an unmistakable image in front of him that attracted all of his attention. Phew. Octopus was finally able to breathe normally. The feeling of restraint on his entire body disappeared. Who in the world is the one having hysteria? Why do I feel like a ghost is pressing down on me? He had the heart to complain, but the entire room was filled with a different kind of suffocating atmosphere. Everyone looked at Luo Nan. Some looked in front of Luo Nan, but no one could understand what was in front of Luo Nan. Luo Nan was still moving. He extended his hand, his index finger slightly protruding forward. It was as if he wanted to draw something, but he hesitated. Octopus was currently the person closest to Luo Nan. There was an inexplicable pressure behind him. He turned to see Cat Eyes standing up from behind the sofa, so he tiptoed over. It seemed safer to have two people as companions. Bah! What kind of damned thought was this? Luo Nan really gave off a very strange feeling. Octopus would never forget the feeling of his breathing being locked. Speaking of which, wasn't there a problem with the intensity of Luo Nan's mental interference with matter? Was his knowledge outdated? Octopus could not help but grow an intense curiosity when he looked at Luo Nan's posture. His gaze swept over and he saw the surveillance equipment he brought. There was a projector attached to it. He had used it to watch a few programs before. He blinked and carefully moved over. He turned on the projector's drawing function, sprinkling a sheet of light. He adjusted it to the tip of Luo Nan's finger. This way, he could more or less figure out what Luo Nan was drawing. Octopus really admired his own train of thought. But a hand reached out from the side just as he was about to place the projector. With a click, the projector was turned off. The one who reached out was Cat Eyes. For some reason, her face was a bit pale. Her expression was solemn. Don't court death. Huh? Shinikuin was a bit more familiar with Octopus. He shook his head. Too sensitive. Octopus was a smart person. He understood in an instant when he heard this. He knew that he had done things poorly. In this dangerous time, any information related to Luo Nan's abilities should be kept as secret as possible to avoid being seized by people with ulterior motives. Even if they could all be trusted, a place like Gear was said to have already been infiltrated by various powers. There was no telling if there was an invisible camera hidden in some corner. Just now, Luo Nan had been injected with medicine, and now he had to record Luo Nan's marvelous state and the results. This was the work of a spy. Octopus raised his hand, indicating that he had lost his mind. It was also at this time that Luo Nan's finger finally determined the location of the pen. It began to wander and trace. There were no obvious directions or traces, so the others were completely unable to understand what Luo Nan was drawing. Cat Eyes might be able to sense a little, but the details were just as Gym Master Shio had said, the most important thing was the details. Luo Nan went to dig out the details under a kind of marvelous awareness. The starry interface of the virtual brain app appeared in front of him. At the center of the outline of the virtual brain, countless stars were concentrated, forming a bright cluster of stars that looked like a silver core. At the edge of the outline of the virtual brain, a small matchstick man made of a few stars and their connections had just moved to this place. In fact, this matchstick man's original position was within the virtual brain. It was just that after the virtual brain app and the drawing software fused together, Luo Nan's format pyramid blended with it, and the starry scene of the self format mixed with it, changing its form. When Luo Nan discovered this, he relied on his memories to restore the matchstick man to its original state, placing it in a corner of the virtual brain's interface. He never imagined that this cautious action would become the key to breaking free from his muddled state. He never imagined that the outline of this matchstick man would actually match the mysterious posture of his grandfather and father in the photo. Of course, the most important thing was that it clearly indicated a certain form and a certain meaning when combined with the photo. If this was the Luo Nan of the past, he might have been suspicious of the logic behind this similarity. But now, under the impact of surging inspiration, he was like a radical painter who had entered a state of mind. His fingertips drew what he thought in his heart. He reached forward with his finger when he had finished accumulating. He tapped a point amidst the hazy and dense stars within the virtual brain's outline. The first time he put his pen to the brush was not at the edge of the cluster of stars. Instead, it was at a region slightly above it. Although the cluster of stars was a combination of the self-format and the matchstick man, the stars were densely packed, and the positions of the points were disorderly. It was extremely easy to get lost within. The matchstick man was too simple, and the symbolism of the photo was too much. Only by combining the three and relying on that instant of understanding could he draw out the outline of the network and draw it invisibly, revealing the true meaning to the greatest degree. Luo Nan's fingertips followed the flow and connected the lines between the stars. It was as if he was drawing a complex constellation diagram. He treated this process as a sketch, but the difficulty was much greater. Not only did he have to draw the picture in his mind, he also had to ensure that the lines traveled back and forth between the points of the stars. This was the difficulty and the limitation, but at the same time, it was a true detail given to him by the existing interface. Luo Nan was still in that marvelous state right now. His train of thought was clear, and inspiration flashed through him without end. When the first brush fell, it was impossible to stop. The outline was already faintly taking shape in less than 3 to 5 seconds. As time passed, the star atlas gradually materialized. It manifested into a small dancing person that was kicking and waving its arms. It was like the matchstick man from before the virtual brain, but it was even more detailed. It was like the laughable appearance of his two closest relatives in the photo, but it was even more abstract. As for the resplendent cluster of stars, it was divided into even clearer layers by these connecting lines. At the center was the image of a dancing person. The shoulders, hands, feet, chest, back, head, and soles of the feet were constrained into 8 indistinct structures. They were like 8 mysterious runes that revolved around the surroundings. Of course, at the center of all of this was the dancing figure. It was the most complete and most mysterious one. When the layers were drawn and the outline was complete, the feeling of sudden enlightenment wasn't completely consumed by the brush. Instead, it was like a great tide under the full moon. The waves behind pushed against the waves in front, piling up layer by layer. An inconceivable power swelled out from this diagram. Luo Nan was shocked to realize that this diagram, the energy contained within it, was within his body. It flooded his limbs and bones. It spread to the tips of his hair and his fingertips. It was omnipresent and omnipresent. Because of this, Luo Nan could practically view it as overlapping with him. From top to bottom, from inside to outside, and it wasn't restricted by the fleshly body. The ability to circulate and transform to the extreme was able to interpret its form, syllables, emotions, and charm to its heart's content. And Luo Nan already knew that this was the word I. It was different from any other language in the world. Its three-dimensional structure was impossible to write on paper, and its syllables were not something one would normally pronounce. It even involved the mental state and all sorts of information changes on the mental plane. It was inconceivably complex. But when its meaning was simplified to the extreme, when it was inclusive to the extreme, it was still the word I. The word I stood there, disregarding its form and sound for the time being. Just its penetrating and clear meaning was able to penetrate from beginning to end. It pushed Luo Nan to continue to delve into all sorts of details, all the way until the impulse of sudden enlightenment was completely exhausted. But the driving force within Luo Nan's mind remained strong even when the outline was clear and the complicated structural lines within neared its end. It was because this word, this meaning, was in high agreement with the ideals he had adhered to and followed for many years. There was no deviation at all. And the details it presented, every dot and stroke, every structure, every change, seemed to have been engraved into his memories and soul a long time ago. This was not the opening of a new world. It was the search for the homeland of his dreams. Later on, understanding, memories, and resonance dominated everything. The power that gushed out was like a great river that converged 100 rivers. It pushed forward layer by layer without end. Under the push of this power, Luo Nan had already ignored everything he knew and felt. He only pondered and experienced the word I. Gradually, those complicated details were exhausted, and the area he wanted to reach became narrower and narrower. Unknowingly, he suddenly reached some kind of indescribable limit. The surging power suddenly collided with the impregnable high wall of a dam. With a loud bang, it violently shook, and then rapidly contracted. The starry sky of the virtual brain's interface instantly collapsed and condensed into a single point. Luo Nan's perception and consciousness collapsed at the same time. It was unknown how much time had passed, but a crack suddenly opened amidst the primal chaos. A single line pierced through the boundless. A single line passed through the dim light. A single line pierced through the void. 3 straight lines crisscrossed and pierced through the origin point, which had collapsed to the limit. It was like a coordinate system, but it was not mathematics. It was a kind of intuition. The unique structure of information went from a point to a line, from a line to a surface, and then to a 3-dimensional space. It continued to flow and change. During this process, the surroundings of Xia City, the surrounding seas, and the wilderness, as well as the millions and millions of living beings that lived and multiplied on them, all manifested their brand new concepts layer by layer. These objects, living beings, and changes that existed objectively seemed to have been painted anew by an extraordinary painter. They revealed inconceivably vivid forms. Luo Nan's horizons were broadened anew. He observed everything with clairvoyance, feeling new and amazed. It seemed that every detail contained sufficient information. There were even more subtle things that appeared within the range of his clairvoyance and the coverage of his soul cloak. They were like countless fragile bubbles. Most of them were not fixed. They had not even truly taken shape. Though they revealed gorgeous colors, they would vanish in large swathes in an extremely short amount of time. Then, they would form in large swathes. Luo Nan watched these things as if he were watching the undulating surface of the sea near the shore. The bubbles, which pushed and squeezed against each other, formed a grand ocean-like scale with astonishing numbers. They painted this world with extremely dazzling colors. Though this was his first time witnessing such a marvel, he had an intense feeling. In the end, he formed a judgment, even though this was completely different from his usual understanding. This was the mental world. Luo Nan was just about to take a closer look when a cold and towering force suddenly crashed into him like a flying peak. It caused this gorgeous scene to violently shake. A familiar thought appeared at this moment. You're quite serious in preparing your lesson. Chapter 548. The person who came was undoubtedly Her Majesty Empress Wu. However, Luo Nan didn't know whether she was mocking or praising him when he sensed this telepathic thought. In the next second, the oppressive feeling and the feeling of impact as the peak flew over, as well as the resulting sense of crisis, pushed him out of the realm of illusory and real, returning him to a more realistic plane. He discovered that his soul strength had unconsciously sunk down on the mental plane. It had already entered the abyss region, and it even affected the deeper layers. No wonder Her Majesty Empress Wu had caught him red-handed. But at the same time, the the massive amount of detailed information he had combed and harvested was gathered together. Layer by layer, it became real benefits. Her Majesty Empress Wu's telepathic thought arrived before he could experience the deeper changes. You have casually invaded the plane of consciousness of others. This is the crime of voyeurism. According to the law, you should be detained, but you can be released on bail. Do you need to pay bail? If you're trustworthy enough, then fine. Luo Nan was already covered in lice. He wasn't in the mood to tease others right now. Especially when he heard Her Majesty Empress Wu describe the plane of consciousness. His curiosity and thirst for knowledge could no longer be restrained. It's related to the plane of consciousness. Aren't those bubbles? Please shut up. Her Majesty Empress Wu bluntly refused his request to communicate. According to my understanding of the situation, every ability user has their own unique insights in this domain. My medicine is another's poison. Peeping isn't enough. Do you want to murder me? Then forget it. Her Majesty Empress Wu's attitude was clear. Regardless of whether or not this reason was valid, Luo Nan didn't need to say anything more. Her Majesty Empress Wu gave him a reminder. I'm very happy that you're working hard, but please don't be too high profile. It's not good to scare the cats and dogs and harm the flowers and plants. Huh. The cold and towering power erupted once more. The incorporeal pressure completely expelled Luo Nan from the mental plane he was currently in. Luo Nan's mental senses took advantage of the situation to leap into the air and return to the polar domain. Almost at the instant he returned, he saw with a far-sighted perspective that a few consecutive waves of unique order fluctuations had cut into the region of the level he was previously at. Looking at the direction, not a single wave came from the city. A portion came from the wilderness outside the city, and another portion came from the open sea. This showed that the effects of the Xia City branch's denial order were quite good. However, from another point of view, the waves it sensed could cross hundreds of kilometers and travel up and down the abyssal region. The source of these fluctuations seemed to be quite powerful. They were at least B+ rank psychic, or even higher. However, Her Majesty Empress Wu's majestic might stretched across the night sky, suppressing the surroundings. Those fluctuations that cut in were instantly crushed into pieces, collapsing into nothingness. Was this a cover for him? If he really got entangled by them, it would be troublesome. Luo Nan gave his thanks in secret, but his heart stirred when he saw this scene. He wasn't in a hurry to leave this troublesome area. Instead, he used his usual, pure observation mode to observe from afar in the polar domain. He wanted to see how Her Majesty Empress Wu's mighty power on the mental plane, as well as how those probing fluctuations that cut in from the outside intersected and surged in the mental world. He also wanted to see how this invisible confrontation would affect the misty sea where billions of bubbles were born and destroyed. Oh, it was truly a gorgeous, complex, and fragile scenery. The confrontation on the mental plane didn't last long. It lasted for a dozen seconds at most. The fluctuations that cut in from the outside retreated in defeat one after another, and Her Majesty Empress Wu's mighty power dissipated into nothingness. However, Luo Nan's eyes were filled with countless details, making it seem exceptionally long. Luo Nan didn't want to leave this wonderful state for a time, but the problem was that Cat Eye's soft voice rang in his ear a few seconds later. Boss? Boss. As his believer, Cat Eyes should have some understanding of the state he was in right now. She wouldn't disturb him for no reason. Something must have happened since he was forcefully interrupted in his state. Luo Nan opened his eyes. It was hard for him to completely separate himself from the misty and colorful mental world for a time. His gaze swept across the several figures in the hall. The mental plane and the material plane worked at the same time, giving him some insights. Yes, there was one more discovery. The several people in the hall were already lacking in confidence, and now they were getting goosebumps from Luo Nan's gaze. Cat Eyes pursed her lips and raised her hand in an attempt to divert his attention. Don't blame me. Her Majesty Empress Wu just sent an order. She told a certain someone to not jump around like that. She told him to honestly teach. She was clearly praising me a few dozen seconds ago. Luo Nan's attention was indeed diverted for the time being. He shook his head, temporarily suppressing the marvelous scene of the mental world to the bottom of his heart. He nodded to Worker Zhai, who had come specifically to cooperate with him in teaching. Worker Zhai, I'll have to trouble you tonight. It's my job. Worker Zhai looked at Luo Nan curiously as he spoke. He had no idea what had just happened. Luo Nan turned his head to look at the color of the sky outside the window. The pitch-black curtain of night had already covered the entire jungle. The intense contrast of the color of the sky and the enormous difference in time were enough to prove the nature of some of the events that had just happened. However, Luo Nan only skimmed through his mind for a moment. 2 seconds later, he entered the virtual brain interface. He had pondered and comprehended so much just now. He needed to understand what sort of changes had occurred in the virtual brain interface. He needed to understand how much he could borrow from the plane of reality. Right now in the virtual brain interface, millions and millions of stars were still densely clustered within the virtual brain's outline at the center. However, Luo Nan was able to see the marvelous and mysterious word, I, within with a single glance. The word I was completely different from the mother tongue he had been familiar with since childhood, including the word I in a limited number of foreign languages. It was even more complex to the extreme. However, after going through layer upon layer of research, the sense of order and layering that had been sorted out from within made him feel pleasing to the eye, even with millions and millions of stars as the background. He was filled with a sense of accomplishment. As for the other elements that revolved around the virtual brain galaxy, there weren't any major changes. The elements that were still being analyzed, like the Blood Soul Temple. Their progress was also following the prescribed order. Then Luo Nan opened the only element that had been completely analyzed. It was Jin Tong's Soul Light Seed. The assembly interface appeared in the first instant. A glaring blood-colored pop-up window followed it like a shadow, flickering in the center of the interface. This warning pop-up window would appear every time the assembly interface was opened. It would automatically disappear after 3 seconds, reminding the user of the abnormal nature of this mode. Luo Nan swept his eyes over it. The hieroglyphs were arranged neatly on top of it. The general idea was, this is an emergency configuration of equipment. Unpredictable consequences may occur when using it. Temporary strengthening must be done according to the technological requirements. Standard parts must be replaced when the conditions are met. Temporary strengthening? How should it be done? The related technological requirements. Huh? Luo Nan was stunned on the spot. The meaning of these words, no, the current situation was, he actually understood it? Chapter 549. Core configuration has changed. The original bound resource is unusable. The Spirit Core system will re-examine. A completely new configuration has been detected. Fusion replacement can be carried out. After fusion replacement, the original bound resource authority will be cleared. Do you want to scan for new resource? Analysis of resource structure completed. No required material components have been discovered within the scanning range. Do you want to proceed with emergency configuration? The adjustment of the emergency configuration structure requires the activation of auxiliary functions to provide additional power for the Spirit Core system. Do you want to activate it? Unpredictable consequences will occur when the equipment is used for emergency configuration. Temporary strengthening must be carried out according to the technological requirements. Standard components must be replaced when the conditions are met. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Luo Nan sat in the central control area of gear. He was writing and drawing on the flexible e-ink screen. As for what he was writing, he wasn't too clear about it aside from the serial numbers above. He was just using this to calm his surging blood energy that was excessively excited. As for the reason for this phenomenon, it was still clear. He carefully rummaged through the virtual brain system and consulted the system records. Finally, he found all the written records on all 5 pop-up windows of the virtual brain interface since it was first opened. He went through them one by one. Luo Nan was already 100% certain that the unfamiliar hieroglyphic characters displayed on the virtual brain's interface were no longer a problem for him to comprehend when he looked through the various characters and information on the virtual brain's interface. That's right. After he understood the mysterious word I, all the words in the virtual brain interface suddenly gained meaning. Luo Nan knew very little about these hieroglyphic characters. The meaning was all sorts of fuzzy when he pulled them out individually. It was a bit better to look at them as a whole. The more characters there were, the clearer the meaning was. However, there were bumps in the details. The words were not able to express the meaning. There were many places where he had to guess blindly. But understanding was understanding. He couldn't give any reason for it. Recognizing these characters had simply become a kind of instinct. He glanced over and the result was right there. The interpretation of the 5 pop-up windows practically swept away all the puzzlement he had been suppressing for a long time. Correspondingly, all sorts of new and novel concepts swarmed over. There were even some things that seemed familiar, things that seemed clear but weren't clear. Unexpectedly, he obtained sufficient and relatively clear answers. For example, the configuration. For example, the dynamo core. More than half of Luo Nan's excited mood was due to the churning effects of these two concepts. He really wanted to immediately drop everything and dive into the laboratory. He wanted to use all of his methods to explore and verify the concepts and all the mysteries behind them. But before that, he had to do the most basic proof. Could the accuracy of such a magical interpretation be guaranteed? Luo Nan wrote and drew with his hand. The flexible screen was a mess, but this was because it was not connected to the interface of the external neuron. On the plane of Luo Nan's consciousness, he had long since switched to the emergency configuration interface. The corresponding, unpredictable consequences, warning pop-up window had already flashed. All that was left behind was the detailed assembly guide interface for emergency combat equipment. Luo Nan's mind gradually calmed down after a series of adjustments. He placed his attention on the inner armor module of the emergency combat equipment. The material required for this inner armor was a polymer composed of a variety of amino acids, which belonged to the category of smart polymer materials. It had a very professional yet very hard to pronounce name. Luo Nan simply called it artificial muscle, based on its use, and put up with it for now. However, there was no way he could make do with the corresponding problem. In the relevant system information, the chain structure and aggregation structure of the artificial muscles had already been listed, and it was easy to grasp. But the problem was that material science was not like building blocks. The reaction conditions for the formation of this material were far too harsh. Only a scant 2 or 3 laboratories in the entire world were able to realize such conditions. Luo Nan used the society's channels to verify things over the course of a day. There was good news, and there was bad news. The good news was that the research on this artificial muscle had already achieved in-progress results, and the actual product had even been produced. The external neuron scan and emergency response plan were established on a relatively realistic foundation. But the bad news was that the material for the artificial muscle was extremely scarce, and there was no mature industrialized production plan. It was accumulated bit by bit in the laboratory. It wasn't even enough for the laboratory to conduct its own experiments. With the amount of material Luo Nan needed, the entire world's production would have to be multiplied by 10. It was obvious that this was an impossible task. Even if the Ability User Society possessed remarkable abilities, and even if President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu had great influence, it was impossible for them to completely empty out their current accumulation and future production. And even if they did, Luo Nan could not afford to wait. In the overall design of the emergency combat equipment, this artificial muscle was an extremely important carrier. It bore the important functions of information conversion and transmission, energy amplification, and force buffering. Without it, the weakening of the exoskeleton's power was a small matter. Luo Nan himself would likely be squeezed to death by the powerful reaction force of the combat equipment. Over the course of a day, the other components of the emergency combat equipment had been transformed one after another with the help of worker Zhai and the others. However, the transformation had become meaningless because of the crucial material, the artificial muscle. Luo Nan was unable to accept this result no matter what. It was under this background that Luo Nan went to explore the virtual brain system with a problem. He wanted to find a solution that would allow him to bypass this obstacle while he tested his own character analysis ability. Fortunately, the virtual brain system came with a built-in user manual. He started writing his lesson plan on Wednesday night, and then he read the user manual with great difficulty. After 10 consecutive hours of translating and guessing, he finally obtained some results and formed a plan. If he succeeded, the emergency combat equipment would undergo a design revision, bypassing the limitations of the artificial muscle. At the same time, it would prove that the character analysis ability Luo Nan had just unearthed possessed a more realistic use. Killing two birds with one stone. Or getting nothing at all. Luo Nan closed his notebook and placed it on the control panel in front of him. He slapped his cheeks forcefully. Then he sat up straight and closed his eyes. He activated the relevant functions of the assembly guide interface purely with his consciousness. A translucent input window appeared to the side of the assembly guide interface. Luo Nan entered a mysterious code into the window through his consciousness. Actually, it was a string of characters formed from these hieroglyphs. It should be something like the developer's instructions. He made two mistakes in the middle. His writing ability was seriously lacking. Fortunately, the system's error correction ability was decent. There were no crashes or anything like that. The assembly guide interface became a bit blurry 2 seconds after the last input. At the same time, a new pop-up window appeared. The words on it roughly read, "Entering development mode. Improper operation may cause the system to crash. How to recover when the time comes," and so on. It was fine as long as he could recover. Luo Nan's courage grew when he saw that there was a way out. He clicked confirm and waited for the pop-up window to disappear. Then he selected the existing inner armor structure on the blurry and intuitive image interface. He removed it from the entire emergency combat equipment system. Of course, he didn't forget to save it. The entire equipment system immediately displayed a large amount of blood red warning color following the disappearance of the inner armor structure. The color spread to every structure and every module. It seemed that there were flaws everywhere. It was the kind that couldn't be saved at all. Luo Nan had anticipated this situation. He waited patiently for about 4 or 5 seconds before a new pop-up window appeared. The words on it read, "There is a problem with this equipment system. Do you want to use AI mode to automatically fill in and correct it?" He chose no, without the slightest hesitation. This was the power of words. If he hadn't read the instruction manual and foolishly chose yes, the only result he would obtain would be to reinstall the inner armor structure that had already been removed. Then he would fall into an endless cycle of removing, installing, removing, and installing. Well, if it weren't for the power of words, he wouldn't even be able to reach this step. Luo Nan entered a few more commands after he finished choosing no. After a series of operations, another pop-up window jumped out. The general idea was, if you determine that you don't need the relevant components, do you want the system to introduce you to a new plan? Of course. Otherwise, why would I be tormenting myself for so long? Luo Nan chose yes in the first instance. The assembly interface blurred once more, but this time it took a particularly long time. Moreover, the glow of the external neuron in his brain dimmed in an instant. This was a manifestation of insufficient energy reserves. Now it was Luo Nan's turn to display his usefulness. He stood up and walked before the control panel. He pressed a single hand on the access detection panel. The ownership of the gear building had already changed from the Order Club to the Mystic Arts Research Society. As a relic of the Order Club and an official member of the Mystic Arts Research Society, Luo Nan undoubtedly possessed operating privileges. But this was meaningless. The external neuron never needed the authorization of the secular society. At the same time, the relevant authority was unable to form any restrictions on it. Just like what Luo Nan had done before, the external neuron extended outward and instantly connected with the energy center of the gear building. It directly extracted an enormous amount of energy reserves. The external neuron seemed to have swelled into an enormous tree at this moment. But in reality, this was just a clear display of its internal structure under the stimulation of abundant energy. Last time a similar situation occurred, Luo Nan's soul strength was just at the beginner level. He was unable to see through the inner workings of the external neuron. But now it was a different situation. Luo Nan could already confirm after reading the massive contents of the Virtual Brain System's instruction manual. Though the external neuron was mysterious, it was indeed man-made. It was a cutting-edge man-made object. Of course, Luo Nan didn't even need to think about replicating it with his current level. But if he were to wait and remove some of the complex high-end links and just touch upon its basic functions, the chances of success would increase by a lot in an instant. Chapter 550. Mr. Luo, are you all right on your side? Qinikuan must have discovered the abnormality in the energy center and guessed that it had something to do with Luo Nan. Therefore, he asked. I'm fine. I'm doing an experiment. Luo Nan responded casually. The electrical glow of the external neuron flickered once more as he spoke. The electrical energy was already full, and the external neuron took the initiative to disconnect from the energy center. But this wasn't the core energy source for the external neuron's operation. The only thing that truly urged it to perform calculations and analysis was Luo Nan's soul strength, which was sufficiently interfered with the stored electrical energy. This was an extremely large consumption, and the spirit core system gave him a reminder. Luckily, Luo Nan had a large production line with a closed system. He had erected a spiderweb of altars in Xia City, and the daily service fee was enough to support him. Luo Nan could feel that the consumption of his soul strength was increasing. The spirit core system entered back-end calculation mode, and the corresponding resource scanning was restarted. It would conduct a comprehensive scan of Luo Nan and his external environment, and make a targeted design. This was a relatively time-consuming process. It would take an estimated 7 to 8 hours. Luo Nan had waited for over a day, so he didn't lack time. He took back his notebook from the control console, drew on it, organized his thoughts, and continued to study the user's manual. This sort of electronic document didn't seem obvious, but the weight of its contents was comparable to an encyclopedic tome. Luo Nan had searched with practical problems in mind, delving into the details and concrete operations. Now he needed a comprehensive grasp. He didn't know how many drafts and mind maps he had drawn, but he finally had some overall understanding. Even though the information within the user's manual was clearly biased towards the practical level, the relevant concepts were massive. Not to mention whether or not he could understand it, he slowly formed the outline of a system as he browsed and pieced them together. He felt that it was extremely vast and profound. Luo Nan read in detail once he had an overall understanding. He was most interested in the concepts of configuration, dynamo core, and the entire spirit core system. He read it over and over again for this reason, and he tried to combine it with the strategic planning technique to further his memory and understanding. He didn't know how much time had passed. Everyone knew that he had to do his homework. He ran over to the control room to hide. No one bothered him for no reason. In between, Cat Eyes had only delivered lunch once. The Hexaear had also sent messages a few times, but he ignored them. In any case, if there were important matters, Qinikuan and the others would definitely tell him. Finally, at a certain moment, the Hexaear continued to vibrate. Qinikuan's communication was connected. Mr. Luo, it's almost time. Shall we go to the venue now? Conference? Luo Nan was unable to react for a time. Conference? Where is the meeting? Qinikuan was also a little confused. After 2 seconds, he replied, today is an exchange course for the elementary training class. You and worker Zhai are going to teach. Today? What day is it today? At this time, Cat Eye's voice cut in, right now, it's Earth's Gregorian calendar, Xia City time, December 14, 1702. Boss, what year and month is it in your divine kingdom right now? Luo Nan finally came to his senses after being ruthlessly mocked. Fuck, it's already Friday. That's right. On Wednesday night, he had a breakthrough on the word I. After that, other than a small portion of his time being allocated to teaching materials, he spent the rest of his time immersing himself in the Spirit Core System's user manual. With such a large amount of content, the amount of time consumed was naturally not little. Oh, I seem to have gone home once in the middle. If this is the case, then it really has been over a day? He raised his head. The central control room's natural light simulation was done quite well, but because of this, he did not know what day it was. Luo Nan patted his head and turned to look at the assembly guide interface. It was still displayed as a virtual effect. Only a calculation and analysis progress bar appeared in the lower right corner. For some unknown reason, the numbers and symbols on it were quite strenuous to understand. But looking at the overall progress, it was more or less done. Should I wait a bit more? Luo Nan responded with 2 grunts from his mouth. The general gist was, I'll be there right away. You guys wait a bit. As for what right away meant, only the Spirit Core System knew. Cat Eyes did not buy his act. She sneered, you don't need to go upstairs. Just meet up with us at the entrance. Right now, there's a huge traffic jam in the city. We need to go to Cloud City Water Village first, then transfer to the flying shuttle. If you're late, then please fly over by yourself. Which idiot put this kind of person in the security team? Cough. Okay, I'm already there. Luo Nan gave up on the idea of waiting for the results in the central control room with great difficulty. He did not dare to look at the interface again. Otherwise, his obsessive-compulsive disorder would kill him. He tidied up a bit and took the elevator to the central control room to go up. Gear's central control room was on the 4th floor underground. He took the elevator up, but not long after the elevator door closed, he became a bit absent-minded. Right now, his mind was still stuck in the user manual. It was hard for him to completely pull himself out of it for a while. The contents of the user manual seemed to talk about mechanical structures and various materials, but the scope of its actual application included various properties and corresponding interference forms on the mental and material planes. Though it was just a single sentence and there were very few explanatory words, Luo Nan was a psychic ability user whose practical ability far surpassed his theoretical ability. He combined his own experience and observed the similarities and differences. He felt that the information inside would give him inconceivable inspiration from time to time. From Wednesday night until now, Luo Nan's brain seemed to have been washed over in a period of over 40 hours. He did not feel it when he was in the monotonous environment of the central control room, but once he walked out, his line of sight and his 6 senses were unable to bear his various gains. His mental senses naturally expanded, connecting to his soul cloak and spreading to every corner of the spiderweb of the altar. He subconsciously narrowed his eyes. For others, this was just an ordinary winter evening. Many days of freezing rain had swept away the last bit of vitality and greenery in the surrounding jungle. But for Luo Nan, no matter the time or place, this world was always blurred and gorgeous. It was to the extent that he needed to exercise a bit of restraint. Otherwise, he might get lost within this world at any time. How wonderful! Seeking knowledge, cognition, disorder, order. Such a pure research process made him feel as if he had returned to 3 or 4 months ago, when he was immersed in his notes and drugs. And the frequent discoveries and improvements he was experiencing right now were extravagant hopes that he would have in the past. If he could combine the strong points of the two and abandon the weak points of the other, then perhaps that would be the happiest of days. Luo Nan let out a long breath soundlessly. The other people from Gear came out one after another. Shui Lei was there as well, aside from the security team. Tonight's course had nothing to do with his fleshly body. He came purely to support Luo Nan's group of friends and family. This brother was clumsy on the outside but skillful on the inside. His social skills far surpassed Luo Nan's. He had joined the Ability User Society for 2 months, and he was already able to call friends and pull out a few people to strengthen his influence. Aside from Shui Lei, the few people in Luo Nan's circle of friends all expressed that they wanted to personally come to the scene. Let's not talk about anything else, but they could cheer a few times and clap a few times to avoid awkward silence. Luo Nan turned his head to glance. Everyone's here? Then let's go. Hold on a moment. Where's Roy Wen? Cat Eyes went downstairs and discovered that one person was missing. Moreover, it was the one with the highest net worth. But she wasn't in a hurry. She just stared at Luo Nan. Luo Nan grunted. He was able to understand her difficulties very well. After all, Roy Wen had the ability to come and go like a ghost. She really wasn't something that an average person could deal with. Luckily, Roy Wen never went too far. Luo Nan sensed for a bit and gave Roy Wen a greeting. A mere 2 seconds later, the girl came out from the forest at the far end of the plaza in front of Gear. Right now, she had already changed into the uniform of Acumen College's lower grade department. Her upper body wore a black striped cashmere sweater, a red-edged chicken collar, and a white shirt. Her lower body wore black trousers and matching leather shoes of the same color. Overall, it was quite conservative, but it inexplicably matched well with Roy Wen. This was especially true during the cold winter. Students usually wrapped themselves in a coat and the like. But Roy Wen came out so refreshingly. Her skin was bright and clean under the contrast of the black school uniform, making everyone jealous. Coupled with her neat short hair, she was simply so handsome that she had no friends. Oh, wasn't this phrase a bit off? Luo Nan's thoughts fluttered in his mind, but he suddenly froze. It must be known that Roy Wen always walked without a sound. She would travel through the air from time to time. But right now, there was actually a squeaking sound coming from her side. Looking carefully, she was actually holding a chubby creature with brown fur in her bosom. A mouse? It's a muskrat. Ability users who roamed the wilderness all year round were basically half biologists. Cat Eyes quickly recognized it, but she had a stupefied expression. Luo Nan was the same. Did Roy Wen no longer exclusively dote on crows? Did she change her tastes? He had just learned an idiom 2 days ago. It was called the owl loves the mouse. It referred to people's tastes and hobbies being different. It really wasn't the same. But no matter what her tastes were, the feeling of carrying a brown-skinned mouse outside was always weird. Luo Nan was pondering over how to make Roy Wen put down her new pet for now, but unexpectedly, the little girl was a step ahead of him. She released her bosom, and the brown-skinned mouse, the muskrat, let out a sharp squeaking sound. It leaped out from Roy Wen's bosom, disappearing into the depths of the forest with a few flashes. Luo Nan was quite embarrassed to see this scene. After all, Roy Wen rarely expressed interest in external objects, let alone directly capturing them. He tried to come up with a plan. Should I just let it go? Actually, it's quite good to keep it in a cage. Roy Wen shook her head slightly, not saying anything. With her temperament, she would let this matter pass. Luo Nan used his mental senses to lock onto the muskrat from afar, leaving behind an imprint. He thought that if Roy Wen was really interested, then he would capture the little fellow and raise it. Hey, why did this little thing look quite familiar? Luo Nan was distracted for a moment, but the spirit core system transmitted over an indisputable piece of information. He shuddered. He didn't care what time it was, and he immediately opened up the installation interface. The effects of the voidification had already disappeared, and the interface was clear and clear. There were some changes to the inner armor structure among the various modules of the equipment, but it wasn't too obvious. He scanned the crafting requirements and saw that it was a different material. Moreover, there was a faint corresponding material within the range of the soul cloak. He let out a breath of relief on the spot. As for the other modules, the changes didn't seem to be too big. Was this all right? Luo Nan felt a bit uneasy. He clumsily mobilized the system's comparison function, and soon, the corresponding data changes appeared one by one. From the comparison, the overall change rate of the emergency combat equipment didn't exceed 7%. The changes really weren't too big. Well, aside from the core equipment that the system had specially marked out. The core equipment. Luo Nan's heart skipped a beat. His thoughts jumped, and he locked onto a simple headband that appeared on his head. This toy was the so-called core equipment. It had a model. If one were to understand it literally, it should be called. Chapter 551. The divine binding hoop was not a complete piece of equipment. In other words, the emergency combat equipment constructed with the divine binding hoop as its core was imperfect. According to the explanation of the Spirit Core system, if one were to use the first default design, the inner armor module would be made from artificial muscles. The entire exoskeleton system would be neutral in nature, and its functions would be relatively complete. Under emergency standards, there would be no obvious shortcomings. It would be suitable for both long-range and close-range combat, and its defensive power would be within an acceptable range. However, the current design had changed a key structure, and the corresponding functions and control modes had deviated. Defensive power, especially close-range defensive capabilities, had dropped substantially. Once the exoskeleton entered combat, it would have to focus on long-range attacks and defenses, especially on the mental plane. In this context, the divine binding hoop was an extremely important conversion and amplification hub. It was indispensable in the design of the entire system. Luo Nan opened the corresponding assembly page and observed its structure. It didn't seem to be particularly complicated. Luo Nan's heart skipped a beat. This doesn't look good. He had done a lot of research on the relevant assembly interface, and he naturally understood that the simpler the structure of the equipment, the higher the material requirements. If he were to encounter something like artificial muscles, he would truly be at his wit's end. Hold on a moment. This toy looks very familiar. Luo Nan slapped his forehead. Wasn't this the headband from a few days ago? That. Jean Tong. The one that Jean Tong always wore on his head? That's right. That's right. Luo Nan had pretty much forgotten Jean Tong's face by now, but he still had a deep impression of the wide iron hoop on Jean Tong's forehead. One reason was because Jean Tong's appearance was truly eye-catching. The other reason was because Roy Wen had crossed space to assassinate Jean Tong, killing him in one strike. The altar frame had swept away all of Jean Tong's flesh and essence, leaving not even his bones behind. All that was left was the iron hoop. Luo Nan had left the iron hoop behind because he wanted to use it to intimidate all sorts of thieves, to make them harass him less. Later, he discovered that things weren't that simple. His killing intent swelled, and Her Majesty Empress Wu woke him up. He completely abandoned his immature plan and switched to implementing the altar spiderweb layout. As for the headband, it seemed to have been taken away by the Mo Luan puppet. It was placed in an anonymous storage box at a subway station in Xia City. Damn, what was the password again? As he thought about it, he followed Shui Lei and the others to change locations. By the time they felt the winds suddenly increase, the group had already arrived at the Limestone Water Village Hotel in the large residential district and boarded the landing platform. The temperature of Xia City dropped again over the past 2 days. Strong winds and freezing rain blew on the high-altitude platform. Even though the floor heating equipment was running 24/7, there would still be ice particles tumbling from time to time, forming a layer of white fur. The shuttle was ready, and there was even a female flight attendant standing by the gangway with a smile. In this windy weather, she wore a small round hat and a dark blue windbreaker, revealing only the slender curves of her calves. She was a very stylish uniformed beauty. Seeing this, Shui Lei exclaimed in admiration, "The treatment of bosses and professors is indeed different. Not to mention the flying shuttle, even the flight attendants are assigned." Before he could finish his words, he realized that something was wrong with the atmosphere. The security team looked over with cold gazes. He immediately realized that this was not a flight attendant, and she looked very familiar. A few fragments of memories flashed through his mind, and he finally remembered. Zhang Ji, that Zhang Ji Frontier streamer, right? Why is she here? Yeah. Why is she here? Cat Eyes snorted twice. It was fine if they wanted to interview her, but how could the timing be so coincidental? Zhangji lightly held her small round hat with one hand to prevent it from being blown away by the wind. Even so, her bearing was still dignified and professional. She greeted with a smile, "Hello, Boss Luo." "Hello, everyone. I took the liberty to disturb you because your branch uses the resources of Xia City's military. It just so happens that Major General Tian Bang owes me a favor, so he gave me a chance to interview Boss Luo." She opened her mouth and sold out the backstage, but it was also because of this that the security team felt that the situation was even more complicated. Currently, the cooperation between the Xia City branch and the government and military could be considered relatively close. In other words, everyone had to give each other face. And Tian Bang was one of the few people who maintained a relatively good relationship with several parties. If it was because of his face, the Xia City branch would really have to pay attention. Of course, whether it was Qinikuan, Gouda, or Cat Eyes, they were all security personnel and not politicians. All they had to do was strictly adhere to security standards. As for the attitude of the branch's big shots, they could wait until they gave the order before considering it. Qinikuan extended his hand to stop Zhangji, not letting her go forward. "If there's a need for an interview, please contact the branch's coordination department. I'm a flight attendant of the shuttle right now. Then please follow the requirements of flight attendants and guarantee the employer's privacy." Qinikuan invited Luo Nan to board the plane as he spoke. Luo Nan glanced at Zhangji. Zhangji already had ample experience in similar encounters. She saw Luo Nan look over, and she instantly switched to reporter mode. She split the camera lens into two, one was secretly aimed at Roy Wan, and the other was aimed at Luo Nan. She waved her hand and shouted loudly, "Boss Luo. Can you talk about your current thoughts and attitudes? What are your thoughts on the current situation within and outside of Xia City? Can you make a prediction about the future development?" Luo Nan stopped at the bottom of the accommodation ladder. He seemed to have been moved. God saw this and whispered into Luo Nan's ear, "Don't pay attention to this kind of person. She can do anything to attract attention." Zhangji didn't even need to think to know that God definitely didn't have anything good to say. But she had high expectations for Luo Nan's reaction. It would be fine as long as he didn't completely ignore her. If he really couldn't do it, she could say a few more stimulating words. As long as there was an explosive point, everything would be fine. "He's doing a live broadcast." Luo Nan's response stunned everyone for a moment. Qinikuan turned his head, "Mr. Luo." In the end, he couldn't say anything to dissuade her. Because at this time, Luo Nan extended his arm and swept it over the top of his and Zhangji's empty heads. It was like he was fishing out an invisible net. Luo Nan even rubbed his fingers a few times, as if he was testing the weight of the material. "What does that mean?" Qinikuan was stunned, and so was Zhangji. Luo Nan paused for 2 or 3 seconds before speaking. "There aren't too many of them. Less than 2,000 people." Zhangji subconsciously glanced at the number of viewers in the live broadcast room. 1854 people. She was stupefied there for a moment, but soon suspicion grew in her mind. This bro couldn't have seen the number of viewers online and come over to scare me, right? How boring could this be? Luo Nan walked up the gangway. "Since Tian Bang told you to come, then come." Qinikuan and God wanted to dissuade him, but Cat Eyes stopped them. She discussed with them in a special channel, "Boss Luo's brain isn't normal. There's no point in opposing him. What's wrong with letting this woman come up?" In any case, the following event was absolutely public. Even if this woman didn't take pictures or interviews, there would still be a large number of people taking pictures and uploading them online. This kind of information was worthless. Plus, it gave them a reason. When the teaching event ended, they would immediately kick this woman away. She wouldn't be able to say anything. Cat Eye's plan was very reliable. At least, it was much more reliable than Luo Nan's baffling idea. The security team quickly formed a consensus. They tacitly agreed to let Zhang board the flying shuttle. Zhang never expected that her live broadcast event would actually have such a smooth start. She immediately revealed a smile and put on the appearance of a qualified flight attendant. After boarding the shuttle, she poured tea for Luo Nan and the others. Her service was meticulous. According to her thoughts, it would be best if she could conduct a brief interview with Luo Nan on the flying shuttle. She would use words to guide and clarify the theme of this live broadcast event. However, Luo Nan never opened his mouth again after he said those baffling words to her under the gangway. He even closed his eyes on the flying shuttle. He had an appearance of deep contemplation and planning. Zhang didn't have the chance to speak at all. And at this time, the number of viewers in her live broadcast room began to skyrocket crazily. Ever since she got on the shuttle, it broke through the 10,000 mark from less than 2,000 in a short 2 to 3 minutes. Hundreds and thousands of 66666 began to violently flood the screen. Professionals are so awesome. Miss 2 out of 1,000, I've finally seen you up close. Unexpectedly, you don't seem to have that kind of weak appearance. Hua hua. What a handsome little girl. I think I see a golden, sparkling radiance. Zhang, why don't you pluck a hair from Miss 2 of 1,000? Selling it for $1 million shouldn't be a problem. Do you have a specific location? Should I kill my way over? If you want to go, gather together and sign up. We'll hold a memorial service for you in advance. Of course, there were some who had crooked thoughts and spoke sour words. What price did Zhang pay? That donut isn't a good thing. Zhang shamefully plays panoramic file. Begging for seeds. Here's the link. The title in front, Deceiving My Feelings. Compared to a high-end talk show like Face Reading, there were still very few people who could truly gather information from it. For the vast majority of low and middle-level ability users, Zhang's live broadcast was much more stimulating. Therefore, it was full of explosive power. Zhang obviously wouldn't let this show proceed smoothly. Right now, her mind was filled with all sorts of extremely challenging ideas. If she could have explosive power, it would be worth it even if she kicked her off the flying shuttle right now. But before that, the most important thing was to extend the duration of the show as much as possible. Therefore, Zhang behaved very obediently on the flying shuttle. Most of her energy was used on interacting with the viewers in the live broadcast room. In fact, this was the proper path for most live broadcast programs. Through interaction, she quickly gathered information from all sides and handed it over to the behind-the-scenes team to analyze to determine the explosive point that the tens of thousands of viewers cared about the most. Overall, there weren't any particularly abrupt points of attention. Most people still wanted to know where the most valuable target in the world was, what it was doing, and where it would go in the future. Without a doubt, the strength of the security team and the abilities of the main targets were all information they desperately wanted to know. Zhang tried hard to find a good entry point. Chapter 552. As the winter solstice approached, the length of daylight in Xia City approached its limit. Especially with the consecutive days of overcast rain, the color of the sky darkened early in the morning. One could only see the dusky curtain of night descend even when traveling through the high-altitude traffic layer. However, millions upon millions of lights were already spread out within the scope of the metropolis. The traffic snaked about, and the red and white lights were like the waters of a river. The enormous city area was divided into intermittent blocks of colorful light. It was like a nation of 1,000 islands floating above the black tide. The night scenery of Xia City was undoubtedly extremely beautiful. However, Luo Nan's line of sight was filled with splendor, but it was not the sea of lights of the city. Instead, it was a marvelous scenery on the mental plane. Countless dazzling bubbles were pushed and stacked on top of each other. Most of them were popping up and then extinguishing. They flowed and changed extremely quickly, and they even warped and pretended to form an extremely complex and irregular state. As for its general shape, it was simply vast and mighty. It stretched across the boundless horizon. It was said to be a vast ocean, but it was only a simple intuition or analogy. There was absolutely no understanding of the whole in the true sense. Luo Nan was unable to find an accurate definition of the scope, so he studied the concept of depth. The 3 layers, one area, one domain theory of the inner world attempted to differentiate and analyze this dazzling mental world from the concept of depth. Previously, Luo Nan had used a pure observation mode of clairvoyance. The scene he perceived was quite different from the commonly used theory. However, ever since he outlined the peculiar word, I, in his mind, he suddenly understood that the difference between the 2 scenes was actually due to the difference in observation angle and emphasis. There was a deep level of knowledge within. Luo Nan diligently studied the user manual of the Spirit Core system for the past 2 days. He used the results of his study to corroborate with what he knew, saw, and felt in the past. He gained much, and his understanding became clearer. But at the same time, he came into contact with many more, even more marvelous, even more inconceivable phenomena. Actually, he could see these things before, but his understanding was unclear and unclear. It was hard for him to filter out special and independent components from the numerous and complicated phenomena. For example, he never thought that the electromagnetic waves that carried the flow of information could form an efficient and direct effect on the mental plane. Just like the current situation in the flying shuttle. Due to Zhang Ji's live broadcast, the electromagnetic waves that carried the effective content formed a sort of force field. It acted on the mental plane, causing countless strands of soul strength to twist and mix within, forming wondrous specks of light and vortexes. Many of these soul energies originated from thousands or even tens of thousands of kilometers away. It was no wonder that many people always said that the mental plane belonged to another dimension. If one did not interfere with the physical plane and simply manipulated and distorted it, it would be much easier than imagined. Then again, it wasn't like he couldn't interfere. According to the user manual, everything was a structural problem. Luo Nan's gaze moved back from outside the porthole as he thought to himself. He cast his gaze onto Zhang Ji, and he felt a bit emotional. However, his overly direct gaze made Zhang Ji's heart tremble. The tens of thousands of viewers in the live broadcast room only made eye contact with him once. He's not old, but his lust is not small. The latest perverted shota is out. Zhang Ji, don't be afraid. I'm behind you. He must have felt the resentment of thousands of people. Isn't that greed? There were changes in the spots of light and the vortex, but there was still no meaning in the structure. As Luo Nan was thinking this, the flying shuttle had already arrived at the Shangding building. It was the safest place in Xia City most of the time. The one who came to receive them was Zhang Yingying. Compared to the freezing winter weather, she was dressed a bit too lightly. She wore a beige windbreaker paired with an oversized t-shirt. Her lower body was ripped denim, and her knees revealed very damp fishnet stockings and fair skin. She wore a baseball cap on her head. She gave off a rather rebellious feeling, but she was also unrivaled in youth. Compared to Zhang Yingying, Luo Nan's clothes were far too scholarly. Acumen College didn't force students above the 10th grade to wear school uniforms, but Luo Nan had never put any effort into dressing up. He wore shirts and pants all year round. When the weather was cold, he would add a layer of thermal underwear and the like. Acumen College was a well-known school, so the uniform issued by Acumen College perfectly met all of his requirements. Therefore, he was wearing a school uniform right now. His overall shape was similar to Rui Wen's, just that he wore a thick jacket. He stood next to Zhang Yingying, making her look like a little girl delinquent. Perhaps everyone had a different aesthetic point of view. Zhang Yingying couldn't help but purse her lips when she saw his attire, this appearance. Are you sure you can control the situation? Take off your jacket, go in, and stand on the lectern. Everyone will suspect that you went into the wrong room. Cat eyes passed Luo Nan and gave Zhang Yingying a hug with a smile. She also joked with her, that's just to match you. Maybe it was you who urged him to skip class. Yeah, maybe it was an elopement. Get lost. Okay. What I mean is that you personally came to greet him. That's quite a high standard. Zhang Yingying sneered, the host is the vice president. That's even higher. Secretary you're supporting the boss? Maybe. Oh right. Have you shown the new version of the lesson plan to the boss yet? Zhang Yingying said the last few words to Luo Nan. Then two bosses were put together in a row, and the reference was not the same. Everyone was a bit dizzy. Cat Eyes furrowed her brows. Can you change the way you address him? Calling him Your Majesty is more recognizable. Why don't you change it on your side? I can call him boss. A certain someone definitely won't get it wrong. Zhang Yingying giggled as she pushed Cat Eyes. The relationship between the two wasn't bad to begin with, and they had made progress in this period of time. Their continuous conversations had left everyone else hanging. Then Zhang Yingying turned her eyes to see the beautiful air stewardess who had followed them in an imposing manner. She had watched the live broadcast 2 days ago and had a deep impression of this female anchor. You're Zhang Ji? Damn, you're still broadcasting. Zhang Ji smiled and bowed. The live broadcast room had already reached a small climax because of the appearance of this rebellious beautiful girl. Alert alert. Xia City is overflowing with beauties. The pressure on everyone who licks the screen is overloaded. Xia City is great. It's great. Why did I cancel the ticket I booked 2 days ago? I'm trying my best to lick the screen and my tears are falling. As strong as a martial monarch, as rich as Roy One, as charming as... What's the name of this beauty? Has no one noticed that the perverted Shota's female bodyguard is also super awesome? She's my type. Not to mention the chaos in the live broadcast room, there was also the negotiation between Zhang Yingying and Zhang Ji. Luo Nan had just been reminded by Zhang Yingying, but he wasn't able to wake up in time. He pondered as he walked. Only when he entered the elevator did he have the chance to ask Zhang Yingying, new version of lesson plan? What new version? It's the one that's been changed. Zhang Yingying's voice was cut off. She was suddenly alarmed. Luo Nan was even more stupefied. Why do you want to change it? Zhang Yingying was silent for a second. Then she suddenly extended her hand, to block the floating camera on Zhang Ji's shoulder. Stop filming. Zhang Ji just laughed. She wasn't worried. She had specially upgraded her filming equipment over the past 2 days. The floating camera and her eyes formed a two-way complement. Whether it was what she saw with her own eyes or the camera lens, as long as one of them existed, the effect of the filming would not be affected. She just gave way symbolically and continued to stare unwaveringly at Luo Nan. How could Luo Nan care about anything else? He focused his mind on looking at the Hexier interface. Soon, he found the message from Her Majesty Empress Wu among the few unread messages. Looking at the time, it was around noon. He had adjusted the operating mode of his equipment and charged the external neurons. Back then, he had focused his mind on reading and analyzing the user manual. He had completely ignored the message from the Hexier. Why wasn't there a special prompt? A phone call would have been fine. This display was unreliable. Luo Nan ridiculed wildly as he opened the relevant interface. Then, clear handwriting appeared before his eyes. It should be Her Majesty Empress Wu's handwriting. Bullshit. I don't know if I should say MMP. If you don't let me say it, then I have nothing to say. And at this moment, Luo Nan's corresponding micro-expression passed through the lens of Zhang Ji's live broadcast. It crossed mountains and rivers to arrive before the eyes of tens of thousands. No, it had already reached 20,000 viewers in the live broadcast room. Wahahaha. See that? I give that dumbfounded expression 100 points. 1,000 points. 10,000 points. What a performance. Oh my God. What should I do? What should I do? Why hasn't the training started yet? I can't help but look forward to it. I beg Her Majesty Empress Wu to review the text. My dinner money is all here. I'm sorry. Although I know it's wrong, I'm at the scene. I'll hold back from showing off a bit. Zhang Yingying couldn't help but jump into Zhang Ji's live broadcast room. She saw the instant explosion of bullet screens and the terrifying rise in the number of viewers. She couldn't help but feel dizzy. Were all the ability users of the world waiting to watch a good show? Zhang Yingying's gaze pierced towards Zhang Ji. Zhang Ji put her hands together and made an apologetic gesture, but she still resolutely continued the live broadcast. What a joke. She would continue the live broadcast even if she was killed. Zhang Yingying's eyes revealed an ominous glint in response. Qi Nikuan whispered, "It's useless. Everyone can broadcast. Something good will definitely happen. It will continue." The elevator arrived with a ding-dong while they were talking. Luo Nan walked out of the elevator and arrived at the venue of today's elementary training in Xia City. There was already a staff member waiting outside. He led Luo Nan over when he saw him. "Mr. Luo, please come this way. The last class ended a bit early. Mr. Zhai's experience exchange is about to begin. It's estimated to be around 20 minutes. Luo Nan instinctively said, "Oh," and walked out of the elevator. However, Zhang Yingying rushed in front of him. She gritted her teeth and said to the staff member, "Internal training. Disconnect the internet." The staff member was stunned. He subconsciously said, "We agreed that the entire elementary training would be broadcasted live on the Psychic Wave Network." Live my ass. Zhang Yingying couldn't help but curse. Gao stood in front of Zhang Ji, blocking her in the elevator. He temporarily prevented her from filming. However, the number of bullet screens hit a new high today amidst the terrible live broadcast experience. At the same time, the purity of the comments also rose. There were thousands upon thousands of laugh or cry emojis. Qi Nikuan finally sighed. This was truly a tragic way to handle public opinion. In the end, they were just security guards. They weren't professional public relations personnel. The group of people looked at each other in dismay in the elevator. The staff member had an innocent expression on his face. The sound of microphone testing could already be heard in the conference room. The buzzing noise of human voices became clearer. Luo Nan scratched his head at this time. He didn't say anything and just walked straight ahead. Zhang Yingying wanted to pull him from behind, but she was stopped by cat eyes. 20 minutes is very precious. In reality, Luo Nan had walked through the corridor for no more than 2 seconds. Under the guidance of the staff member, he entered through the entrance of the lounge. He didn't stop and went to the front desk. Chapter 553. Luo Nan walked out from backstage and followed the staff's instructions to the waiting area next to the podium. He sat down next to the host, He Yueyin. Of course, he heard the laughter in the venue. He Yueyin also shot him a glance. The meaning in her eyes was that she had some understanding of the situation just now. The most innocent and the most confused was worker Zhai. He subconsciously looked toward Luo Nan. Luo Nan nodded towards him, letting him concentrate on reading the script. Then he slightly adjusted his sitting posture, using a relatively natural posture to look around the entire conference room. The primary training class was held in the largest circular conference room on the lowest floor of the Shangbing building. This luxurious venue, which could easily hold over 1,000 people, was rarely used. The last time it was used was during the turmoil of the human-faced arachnid. It was said that the situation was terrible at the time. Nearly 10 ability users had already been corroded by the human-faced arachnid. After they were identified, the human-faced arachnid launched an attack against all the members of the meeting. Although no one was killed or injured in the end, all the infected died. Even if President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu were present, they could not stop this tragic accident. That was why it was said that there was a limit to a person's strength. The complexity and unpredictability of the spiritual plane was evident. There was no trace of the tragic incident that happened more than 2 months ago in the venue. It was densely packed with people, easily more than 1,500 people. There weren't that many awakened in the entirety of Xia City. In reality, awakened ones weren't the majority. Many of them were like Worker Zhai, who was a peripheral member. This was the difference between this elementary class and the previous ones. The scope of its training was expanded, no longer aimed at those who had just entered the awakened realm, but rather those who had hopes of awakening but had yet to awaken, or those who had the aptitude and possibility of awakening were also invited. Of the 600,000 ability users in the world, only 70,000 awakened ones could truly enter the inner world's main circle. There were 88 large metropolitan areas, and each city had a population ranging from 1,000 to a few hundred. The remaining 500,000 people were in the outer circle. On average, there were 5,000 to 6,000 people in each city. Among these 5,000 to 6,000 people, most of them had inexplicably gained certain abilities, but they did not have a complete cultivation system. With their special abilities, a considerable number of them became elites in various industries, but because they did not reach the standard of awakening, they could not reach the edge of the main circle. Some of these outer members were content with the status quo, but most of them hoped to advance further. After all, when a certain, higher level, world was within reach, how could one be satisfied if they did not really touch it, set foot in it, and experience it for themselves? Worker Zhai was a typical member of the outer circle. He had wasted many years for the sake of awakening. Now he had finally overcome that obstacle. Perhaps his status and authority in the mundane society had not changed much, and even his own strength had not been reborn, but by the standards of the inner world, he was fundamentally different from the other people in the outer circle. Didn't people seek value from differences? The atmosphere in the conference room was quite enthusiastic before Luo Nan arrived. This could be seen from the applause they gave Worker Zhai. This was supposed to be a very good beginning, but it had changed a bit because of the accident brought by Luo Nan. Most of the outer circle members couldn't enter the inner world's main circle. They couldn't use the advanced functions of the psychic wave network, and they didn't have a member account in the Ability User Association. However, there would always be some busybodies in the main circle who would leak some news from within the circle through various channels. For example, many people knew about the matter of Miss 2000. There were also quite a few people who were able to watch Zhang Ji's live broadcast. This kind of information spread extremely quickly. In the few seconds that Luo Nan entered the venue and took his seat, the relevant information had already covered at least a third of the people in the venue. And the information continued to spread along with the undisguised laughter. Zhang Ji broke away from Zhang Yingying's murderous gaze and quietly entered the venue. She encountered quite a few people who greeted her, gave her thumbs up, or looked at her with cold eyes. Because of this, she quickly locked onto the best broadcast spot with the help of a group of busybodies. The podium and the venue's environment were fully captured by the camera. The number of viewers in the live broadcast room had already broken the 20,000 mark. It was close to the peak of the battle between Her Majesty Empress Wu and Jin Tong. Zhang Ji's heart was incomparably satisfied. The Xia City branch still cared about face. Their relatively soft measures gave her the opportunity to further expand her influence. She sat comfortably in the center of the podium, directly facing the podium. She was surrounded by awakened ones, and one of them took the initiative to reach out and greet her. Miss Zhang Ji, the live broadcast just now was very beautiful. Zhang Ji turned her head. Next to her was a rather handsome Western-styled man. Though he had medium long hair and wore a single earring, his body was strong and masculine. The most important thing was that he looked a bit familiar. You are? Long 7. A bitter observer. Observer? You really don't look like one. Zhang Ji responded casually, but a certain region in the depths of her brain suddenly stirred. Some memories flipped to the surface, and at the same time, the real-time intelligence of her team behind the scenes was updated. The two were combined, and the information revealed caused her eyes to slightly widen. Oh my God, how did you get in here? Oh, Miss Zhang Ji knows me? You seem to be. Zhang Ji hesitated for a moment. She couldn't immediately continue speaking. Long 7 was quite curious. He asked, what is it? If you're courting death, then I won't be polite. Zhang Ji raised an eyebrow. You're an experimental member of a cooperative project between the Society and Quantum Corporation, right? You're an ability user who voluntarily awakened, yet you voluntarily accepted transformation into a burner. Back then, I wanted to do a special topic on you, but the boss rejected me. Long 7 was still smiling. Thank your boss for me. Otherwise, I might not be able to sit so peacefully right now. But you're now a member of Quantum Corporation. Zhang-Ji's voice lowered a bit in the latter half of her sentence, but this was meaningless. This was because the conversation between her and Long 7 was being watched by over 20,000 ability users at the same time. There were already quite a few fangirls licking the screen in the live broadcast room. Of course, there were even more people denouncing this bastard who took the initiative to strike up a conversation. When Zhang-Ji's words left her mouth, the screen was filled with 666,666. This could be considered the final commendation and additional wreath for this observer who charged into Dragon Pool alone. Report, report. I want to report. I've already contacted the security personnel. Friends in the 7th row directly in front of the speaker's seat, please evacuate immediately. Fuck, I see him. He's just 2 rows away. A bloody storm seemed to have already swept through the live broadcast room, but on the plane of reality, aside from a few people casting curious gazes over, nothing else had happened for the time being. Long 7 smiled calmly in response. I already said I'm an observer. Of course, I reported to the Xia City branch beforehand. And I also have membership in the society. Someone's smiling face is really asking for a beating. The waters here are deep. Mom, I see a conspiracy. What is the Xia City branch doing? This kind of situation needs to be fought. In a certain sense, beautiful women and beautiful men were the source of calamity, especially when they had the gift of attracting hatred. The situation had changed a bit. Not only in the live broadcast room, but also in the venue, there were some buzzing sounds. Quite a few people already knew that Quantum Corporation had actually sent a so-called observer deep into the heart of the Shangding Building's circular conference room. They were openly making a fool out of themselves. This was simply intolerable. Some of the die-hard members of the Xia City branch were already rubbing their palms together. They were ready to get up and beat that pretty boy Long 7 into a pig's head and then kick him around like a ball. The venue was a bit chaotic, so much so that He Yueyin, the host of the meeting, coughed lightly and temporarily interrupted worker Zhai's speech. She regained control of the venue. The members participating in the training have all been carefully considered and evaluated by the branch before they were invited. I hope everyone will abide by the venue's order and respect the lecturers and speakers. Thank you. He Yueyin's words had a hidden meaning. It suppressed the atmosphere that was on the verge of going out of control, but it made the discussion below grow even louder. It was as if Long 7 was completely unaware that he had become the fuse. He continued to chat with Zhang-Ji. His words were unrestrained. Your live broadcast has given Officer He quite a headache. It wasn't easy for her to arrange for so many people to attend today's lecture. It was great to have a guy who was courting death. Zhang-Ji keenly discovered an opportunity. If she could form a tacit understanding with this so-called observer and temporarily become partners, she might be able to dig out even more explosive points. So she immediately cooperated. What do you mean? It's just as Officer He said. The people in the venue have been carefully selected. Let's not talk about talent. Quite a few people have considerable influence in Xia City. If our boss Luo can make a name for himself, it will be much more convenient for him to do things in the future. His deterrent power will also increase. But now it seems that you've directly sent him into hell mode. Do you need me to escort you out of Xia City in a bit? Hee, I wouldn't dare to trouble you. Zhang-Ji laughed dryly in reply. She actually understood something. Limited by tradition and the fear of the secular world, the inner world was generally a relatively closed circle. Much of the influence they had towards the secular world needed the outer members to spread it out. He Yueyin's plan could not be said to be incorrect in response to this situation. But right now these outer members were influenced by the live broadcast and the other awakened ones. They already had a preconceived opinion of Luonan. And from Jean Ji's aesthetic point of view, Luo Nan's age and attire really weren't impressive. Indeed, she had adjusted the difficulty of the game for the youth who was about to step onto the podium to a very high level. How was he going to leave Xia City? As luck would have it, Jean Ji just so happened to meet Luo Nan's gaze as he scanned the venue. Under the influence of the illumination, it was impossible to distinguish for a time. Were those eyes empty, flustered, or vacant? The light spots and whirlpools of the mental world tend to be unified. Overall, they are quite negative, but they have yet to form a meaningful structure. Chapter 554. Alright, Luo Nan admitted that there was a problem with the lesson plan, and it was a problem with his attitude. He had suffered a series of shocks that night, so he really did not have the mood to ponder over words and logic. It was inevitable that his writing was somewhat random. Now, after the baptism of the word, I, and the study of the instruction manual, he could not bear to look at this lesson plan again. New ideas and old ideas were mixed together, and logical contradictions could be seen everywhere. There were also a few words that were almost sleep-talking. At the time, they had frightened worker Zhai, but they couldn't escape Her Majesty Empress Wu's sharp eyes. Courting death. Luo Nan scratched his head again. There was nothing much to say. He needed to completely discard his old train of thought. But where should he start to articulate his new ideas? He didn't care about the environment in the venue. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, he opened his notebook and wrote on the flexible e-ink screen. Unfortunately, he fell into a cycle of denial, and denial. He couldn't help but poke his forehead with his pen, feeling very distressed. Muffled laughter resounded throughout the venue. The live broadcast room was even more straightforward. Once again, the screen was flooded with crying laughing emojis. At this moment, the number of viewers in the live broadcast room had climbed to 25,000. It was infinitely close to the peak of a battle between two extraordinaries. As for the content of the live broadcast, strictly speaking, it was nothing more than a small thesis written by an awakened. In the end, worker Zhai was still somewhat affected. The speed at which he read out the materials increased. Soon, he finished reading out the draft full of data, and the time for the exchange began. Now it was He Yuan's turn to host the exchange. Of course, this kind of activity would definitely have actors, and the questions had also been carefully designed. After the two shills spoke one after another, an outer member finally asked about the specific details of cultivation, and things were on the right track. But this time would not last too long. After all, whether it was the outer members or the busybodies, the true meat of the show lay with Luo Nan. There were quite a few people who intentionally interfered during normal communication time, hoping to get Luo Nan involved. Fortunately, He Yuan methodically controlled the pace of the venue and didn't give those people any chance. Luo Nan thanked He Yuan for her help, but he wasn't able to take this opportunity to completely straighten out his train of thought. He continued to write one word at a time, drawing one word at a time, and spinning in circles on the spot. Just as he was in a dilemma, a new message arrived on the psychic wave network. Luo Nan didn't dare to ignore it anymore. He immediately opened it. Unexpectedly, the information actually came from He Yuan. It was a cloud document that had just been created. The collaborative editing mode had already been activated, and a portion of the introductory words had already been written on it. Looking at the tone, it was clearly meant for Luo Nan. Without a doubt, this was He Yuan's handiwork. She was the host, controlling the rhythm of the venue, and at the same time, she rushed it out. Luo Nan subconsciously raised his head to look at the lady in formal attire beside him. However, the latter did not have any extra expression on his face. He did not even look him in the eye. He only gave an explanation to the train of thought in the private channel. The situation is rather chaotic now, and the beginning is not favorable. It's best to use self-deprecation and humor to eliminate the negative impressions of most people. It's better to be honest. As for what to say next, you don't need to worry about it. If you can't think of anything at the moment, you can use your own experience to tell a story. If you have any inspiration, you can use it on the spot. Don't be nervous, your own experience is already legendary. Is that what you think of me? Luo Nan held back for a few seconds. In the end, he wasn't able to ask this question. He just said, "Thank you." Afterwards, he didn't have the time to think about the gap between people. He seized the time to familiarize himself with the script. It must be said that the human mind was very strange. It wasn't that Luo Nan didn't have anything in his mind before. It was just that he couldn't find a suitable entry point when he wanted to express his thoughts. The opening that He Yuan had drafted for him now appeared to be just a few polite words. It didn't touch upon any substantive theoretical content, but after sweeping a few glances, he inexplicably had some context in his mind. Time flew by quickly. Even though He Yuan was multitasking, she was able to steadily extend the time of worker Zhai's exchange to 25 minutes. This was already the limit. The noise within the venue grew noisier and noisier. Everyone's patience had already been worn down. He Yuan finally turned her gaze over. Luo Nan took a deep breath and gave her a slight nod. Only now did he completely pull his attention away from the words in the cloud document. He cast his gaze towards the podium not too far away. It was strange. The instant his gaze focused, he suddenly couldn't even hear He Yuan's introduction of him clearly. His mind was buzzing. Was he nervous? Not really. His thoughts were still quite clear. It was just that his brain was a bit congested physiologically. The reason wasn't because he was shy or timid. Instead, it was because of a thought that had just become clear. Wasn't this an opportunity? He Yuan's gaze fell onto his body once more. At the same time, she gestured with her hand, indicating that he should climb onto the podium. Luo Nan stood up completely by following his instincts. The rhythm of his footsteps was a bit rushed. In the end, he collided with the podium, causing the wooden cabinet to slightly sway. The laughter below the podium grew louder. Luo Nan cast his gaze forward, watching the color changes in the mental world of the attendees. At the same time, he also watched the cloud of smoke formed by the tens of thousands of strands of soul strength that shot over from every corner of the globe under the effect of the information field. 27,000 people. After a rough calculation and rounding, Luo Nan came up with an approximate number. This number was admittedly not worth mentioning when compared to the millions and tens of millions of live streams in the secular world. But in the inner world, it represented that he possessed a chance to face nearly a third of the members of the main circle. He could use the most direct method to express his thoughts as he pleased. He actually didn't think of this before. Luo Nan gently placed the notebook on the podium and flipped to the flexible e-ink screen page. The screen lit up, and he opened the drawing software to create a new page, causing it to appear in the form of a virtual workspace. This domain of light blue light was magnified by the most advanced projection system in the circular conference room, and it appeared behind him. Luo Nan subconsciously raised his pen after completing this process. He wrote the 3 words, condensation ring, in the workspace. The words were neat and tidy, but they still carried a hint of immaturity. They were magnified several dozen times, and they were reflected into the vision of nearly 30,000 people inside and outside the venue. Luo Nan wanted to continue writing, but he finally remembered that he hadn't said the polite opening words yet. He forcefully stopped his pen strokes, took a deep breath, and raised his head to face the tens of thousands of visible and invisible gazes. Today's topic is this. I read the script that worker Zhai read just now the night before yesterday. There should be quite a few words of thanks in there, all for me. Actually, I was just sharpening my spear at the last minute. I wasn't really listening. If I'm being overly sentimental, please point it out, everyone. Laughter rang out from below the stage, mixed with applause and whistles. The atmosphere was quite complicated, but the breaths of over 1,000 people merged together, colliding and canceling each other out. The overall atmosphere was quite harmonious, and the atmosphere was enthusiastic. Luo Nan hadn't expected such a self-mocking, self-exploding tone. He relied entirely on He Yuan's script. He was a bit stiff when he read it, but the effect was pretty good for now. Luo Nan didn't continue to act like a good child. Words that were too clever didn't conform to his personality. He quickly entered the main topic. Actually, worker Zhai's success was first and foremost due to his own hard work. I just gave him a suggestion. Actually, it was just the result of a sudden idea I had on the second day after coming into contact with the condensation ring, out of admiration and conviction towards this marvelous structure. And I didn't directly give the suggestion to worker Zhai. Instead, I just blurted it out while chatting with Brother Papercut. Luo Nan had already begun to display his abilities from the start of these words. After all, He Yuan's script didn't touch upon his personal details. Luo Nan followed the suggestion of telling a story and supplemented it. Needless to say, it went quite smoothly as he spoke. Luo Nan clearly felt that it was quite good, but he didn't expect a commotion to suddenly arise in the venue. A large number of people were whispering to each other. The buzzing noise had already affected the effect of the speech. He was stunned for a moment. He wasn't able to continue speaking. He Yuan had no choice but to come out and control the situation. Everyone, please maintain silence. If you have any questions, please wait until the question and answer session. Her control of the crowd was somewhat effective, but not everyone was an obedient child. There was a person in the front row who suddenly jumped up. His hand was raised extremely high. You said that it was the second day after coming into contact with the condensation ring, but worker Zhai just said that he received this suggestion last month. This fellow spoke too quickly. He himself had forgotten the specific time. Luckily, there were some people in the venue who still remembered. They shouted, 6th. 6th of November. Yes, 6th of November. Then here's the question. How long have you been cultivating with the condensation ring? Luo Nan was stunned for 2 seconds. His train of thought, which he had managed to organize with great difficulty, was nearly interrupted. He still had some ability to respond to emergencies. He faced the person in the front row and smiled. Wait a moment. Let me look at the calendar. As he spoke, he actually cut out the interface of the drawing software. He used the calendar software that came with the flexible e-ink screen to look up the calendar. After seeing the specific date, memories of the past few days flashed back one after another. Yes, 5th of November, Monday. My friends and I were at Aurora Cloud City. That night, Tian Bang and Mo Luan fought. Brother Papercut and I discussed this matter a bit earlier that day. As for the time I've been in contact with the ring, Brother Papercut knows the best. It's only been a day, right? That's number 3. Yes, it's number 3. Papercut, who was sitting in the front row, raised his hand in response. He feigned calmness as he faced the camera, welcoming the gazes of over 1,000 people. I was learning soul activation techniques from Brother Papercut during those few days. I asked him if he had any big moves. He introduced me to the RT-8313 mission issued by Her Majesty Empress Wu. Luo Nan gave a simple introduction of the situation at the time. At the same time, he felt that this was really telling a story. It just so happened to meet his requirements, and it connected with the rest of the story. Number 3 heard about the dripping sword. Number 4 watched Her Majesty Empress Wu's demonstration video and began to practice. So, I've only been in contact with the condensation ring for a month. Oh, it's been exactly 40 days since today. So, if you really want me to talk about why the condensation ring is so miraculous and can help worker Zhai awaken, I have no way of telling you. You should go ask Her Majesty Empress Wu. This was supposed to be a joking point, but there was a reaction in the venue. Everyone was buzzing with discussion. It was for no other reason than the 40 days that Luo Nan spoke of. That's right. How long has this guy been in the circle? 40 days of cultivation on the podium. I must have heard a fake lesson. Today's lesson ends here. Let's listen to Boss Luo brag. Isn't there a rumor that his dripping sword is very powerful? Rumor. What's the rumor? Number 800 Manslayer? Hee hee. Hee hee, your sister. If you have the guts, why don't you try becoming a humanoid infrasonic array? That's right. You can do whatever you want with a B-rank danger rating. Hee hee. All sorts of trash talk filled the venue. And in another dimension, a new revelation appeared. Hurry up and look at the Society's main forum. Mission Thread RT-8313. Zhangji's live broadcast program was open to all ability users from all over the world. However, there were quite a few people who didn't like to chat with others in the live broadcast room. Instead, they were used to climbing the discussion forums. Just as Luo Nan was giving his explanation regarding November 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, a female ID called Pandora suddenly appeared in the recently extremely active RT-8313 mission thread. She used a large sum of money to buy several eye-catching props such as highlighting, homepage, stickers, and subtopics. She attracted the netizens who were still wandering in the forums. She also attracted the recent popular character, R.E. Pandora spoke like this, November 4th. What a marvelous day. I suddenly want to skin you. The netizens who were familiar with the recent trend of topics immediately understood what she was talking about. Quite a few people became excited in an instant. The stench of blood is thick. Take a front row seat. Sit on the bench and watch the goddess swing her blade. I want to see a technical post. Where's God R.E.? You're about to be skinned. R.E. soon appeared as well. He was a bit baffled. As the heir of a famous family in the inner world and the disciple of the extraordinary Gong Chi, he always acted in a high-profile manner. He casually posted a selfie. How do you want to skin me with this face? Speaking of which, is she a beauty? If she's a beauty, I'll let you take liberties with her. After a chaotic prelude, someone finally pointed to the main topic. Speaking of which, what's up with November 4th? This day sounds familiar. Did I come to the wrong venue? Eat my teleportation gate. Soon, a link to Zhangji's live broadcast room randomly popped up. It informed a portion of the autistic people about the current hottest topic. A few seconds passed before RE spoke again. This time, he posted the most popular smiley crying emoji of the day. Thanks for the reminder. November 4th is truly a marvelous day. He immediately uploaded a newly completed screenshot with a link. The screenshot looked very familiar. It was actually a record of a post in this forum. The date on it was clearly November 4th, 2096. The speaker's ID appeared to be anonymous, but the post he left behind was the most popular post on the Society's forums. Practicing for an entire morning in exchange for rain. Then there was a picture. It was a bedding being hung out to dry and the faint outline of a human-shaped watermark. Then there was a clip taken from the live broadcast program. Luo Nan said, on the 4th, watch Her Majesty Empress Wu's demonstration video and begin practicing. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.